and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have a fairly busy agenda for the work session, but before we start, I would like to ask Nancy Catula to come up and join us. Nancy is retiring from town service. Oh, come on up. Just come up. Just come up. Just come up. I make it quick. Most recently from the Justice Court for a number of years. Prior to that, the Assessor's Office.
Nope.
Prior to that, the
Tax receiver.
tax receiver's office, and prior to that, the
committees.
Yeah.
That's when the town only had 4 committees.
right.
When you answered the phone out of your house, your
Yes.
kids answer that, yeah.
Yeah. Nancy came on when I was here the first time. Yeah. So Nancy, in appreciation, I'd like to give you.
Thank you.
These are from the town.
Age.
I know.
Yeah, we do.
And this is from me. My spiel is, we don't have a key to the city. So what we did is we have a temporary, honorary ferry token.
What, one way or what? Thank you.
Okay, first item on the agenda is the moratorium we've, Stephen brought up, and we're going to discuss a little bit just to give us the procedure on how it works. And also Liz Galley's here. Liz is our representative on the Suffolk County Planning Commission. So Liz, after Stephen speaks, if you want to say a few words, you're more than welcome. Okay, Stephen?
If I have to, I will.
Sure. As we discussed, the town board is going to contemplate enacting a moratorium on large homes. What constitutes a large home? It's any home that's larger than 5,999 square feet. That's the maximum size you're permitted as of right. Anything above that, you would need to get a special permit from the town board. So the town board is again contemplating enacting a moratorium on the acceptance of any new applications and the processing of any pending applications for a special permit for a home larger than 5,999 square feet. And when I say home, it also includes accessory buildings as well. So it's not just the house.
One of the things Meg brought up was, rather than, it says living space, I think we were looking at the total space of the.
Total square footage of what's going to be constructed, but that would be a result of the moratorium.
Right.
Correct. That's something that, again, we have our comprehensive plan being updated right now. And that's really the impetus for the moratorium, because, you don't want to keep approving things that could be not in keeping with the comprehensive plan. And then also, what's notable is between 2018 and 2021, we only had 4 applications total from 2018 to 2021 for special permits for SFLA. In 2022 alone, there were 5 applications. So as you can see, there's an increase in the number of these applications. So it's appropriate at this time, I believe, to enact such a moratorium. So it's on the website, and I handed out a copy of the proposed local law. That's the vehicle to enact the moratorium. And there's a legislative intent that goes in and speaks to the increased number of applications that I just referenced, and also the fact that we're updating our comprehensive plan, which I just referenced. You really want to determine the impacts on community character, the environment, and the aquifer of granting these special permits. And also, it will be an opportunity to evaluate what mechanism would you want to utilize. Is the special permit process too weak per se? Do you want to make it an area variance as opposed to a special permit? The standard's a little higher for an area variance than a special permit. Or do you want to make the standards for issuing a special permit more stringent? So these are different ways, or prohibit it outright. And, but these are things that you should only make a determination on once the comprehensive plan is updated. Do we have an idea when that's going to be?
The goal is,
The goal is to have a draft before the summer, like a draft of the completed plan for the summer, so that everybody who's out here can see it, make comments on it, changes, additions, public review, solid public input, and then hopefully September, October, we'll have a final. And then we'll go through the secret process,
Secret.
go to the county, and then hopefully it should be finalized by end of November, early December.
Okay, because I'm proposing a one-year moratorium, so that seems to be appropriate for that sequence of events.
yeah,
So again, it would be 1 year. Again, it's going to apply to not only new applications, but pending. So the pending ones are just going to get stayed while the comprehensive plan is updated. No site preparation or construction activities will be allowed, like people that are crossing their fingers that they would be able to get the special permit. So that's prohibited. What I didn't put in this version of the local law is a penalty section. I would like to add that for people who do clear or try to do construction activities in connection with that. I'm sorry.
the penalty for during the moratorium?
Correct.
Yeah.
We're basically violating the moratorium. So I'm going to throw that in, and then we can have that as part of the public hearing. I did allow a safety relief valve for variance. If someone can come in and make a case that they should be able to build larger than what's allowed home, they can do so. However, the burden is very high. It mimics a use variance standard, so
Does that apply to
It's
anybody
extremely
who needs to
difficult.
rectify?
Anybody would be allowed to ask for
Okay.
a variance from it. So in that situation, that might be something that they can articulate, but again, the standard is very high. It's, in essence, it's basically saying that you can't make if you utilized any permitted use under the zoning code, you couldn't make a financial return on your investment, which is, again, quite high, because how are you going to make the case? You're allowed a 5,999 square foot house. So that's where we are. I have a draft for your review. Please look at it. If you have any changes that you want to make, please let me know, and then we can put it up for schedule for a public hearing April 4th at the next town board meeting.
I have a little picayune one, last sentence, summary of proposed law. And and do not create any environmental harm. I would change, almost by definition, there's going to be some
Absolutely
environmental
right.
issue, so excessive or just a different word than any.
Yeah, correct. And this summary of proposed law doesn't go into the law. So this
Right.
is just something that is trying to explain to the people why you're doing what you're doing. But yeah, definitely noted.
Well, one thing, John Needham likes to say on the WMAC that all the easy docks have been built. And anything left is going to be difficult and require machinations to make it work and not harm the environment. Maybe a similar thing soon can be said, or already can be said, about building. Maybe the easy sites have been done, and we're going to be facing not only, but to put a large building on a site that might not be flat and level and easy, or might have, potential water issues in terms of sea level rise. Is that something that we should put in here, that's also sort of what we'd be considering?
No. Again, so we're just
Under
saying,
consideration, I mean,
we're like pausing
yeah.
the processing.
So we
Just
don't
you
have to
can
put that in there
No,
as a
it doesn't-
why.
No.
Okay.
The mere fact that we're concurrently updating the comprehensive plan,
Yeah.
again, we don't want the cart to be before the horse.
Right.
So we want to give the town board the opportunity to be informed by the update of the comprehensive plan, and then also see if they're going to suggest a new mechanism for processing.
I do think that we should come up with a list of things or issues that we're encountering in the review process.
Yeah.
So that we don't, replicate that again later on. Maybe things that are missing, things that get overlooked, or just steps in the process that don't
Right.
quite seem to work.
Yeah. Maybe the CAC environment.
Right.
So Stephen, we'll review your draft, and then we can set the hearing for next week. We'll set the hearing.
Correct, at the next town board meeting. Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you. Liz, anything else?
Yeah, so I
Come
just
on up,
want
come on up, Liz. Again, Liz represents Shelter Island on the Suffolk County Planning Commission.
to, okay, so the Elizabeth Galley, Suffolk County Planning Commission, your representative. So the commission is really pretty strong about moratoriums. I mean, we've encountered a lot of them over the last few years from townships, and the biggest thing that needs to be shown is that there's absolute need. Having the comprehensive plan under review is definitely one of those reasons that we would say yes. But we consider this the biggest restriction of land use by the public, a moratorium is. So I just have a question for maybe all of you to maybe clarify for me, because we'll probably be talking about this on the 4th, which is that when you're going to have your hearing?
That's your next.
Set the hearing.
We won't-
Yeah, but I'll have a copy for you.
Yeah, I mean, have you filed there yet?
No, because this is the first time
Okay.
we're introducing it.
So, well, so we won't be discussing it on the 4th, because then you guys will, and then we'll discuss it probably on the first Wednesday of May, sorry. And I'm the person that, either goes forward and says, I think this is good or bad after I've received the file from the planning commission. And it weighs a lot. So my question is that, and just to clarify, right now in our zoning, we don't have a restriction on building over 6,000.
Yes, we do.
We do.
Yes.
So,
Anything over 6,000 triggers the special permit.
right, so in our zoning, we already have
A prohibition on
Right.
that.
so they might just come back and say, you already have it. Why do you need a moratorium?
Well, again, because there's a special permit process to allow you to exceed it. And that's,
And so you guys still have the right to say no to those special permits, right?
absolutely. However, a special permit, the burden on the applicant isn't that high. So it could be deemed arbitrary and capricious if you just rubber stamp a no. So we want to have a moratorium to see, again, if there's another mechanism that we can do above and beyond a special permit that would, or make the requirements more stringent. And it's not only, we're updating the comprehensive plan, as alluded to earlier, we're getting an increased number of these applications. So those put together is what's justifying this need right now for a moratorium.
Yeah, so that's going to be your biggest challenge with Suffolk County Planning Commission, is that you have the zoning in place and you have to show real need. So it might be good for you to actually, put in the files that you have that are, I'm a little concerned about that you're going to put a moratorium on pending applications as well as future. If you have applications already in, that might be a sticking point for you. And, how many do you have pending?
Christina, do you know? Four.
4. Yeah. Yeah. So,
We're still going to go forward with it.
yeah, I mean, it's just make your case, like really say that, show them that you have 4 applications pending and the size of the lot and the size of the building that is being asked for. And then really showing that you don't have good enough mechanisms in your special permit process to say no.
So Liz, when you say show them, should we make a presentation or just put it all in paper or?
Yeah, as much as you can, you'll have the ability to make a presentation on that that Wednesday meeting on May. And and just having a little bit more conversation with me once with that file, that would be really helpful. But it is, we do take it very seriously. This is not something that's very lighthearted. The moratorium is land use for your residents, and that's what we protect. So it's a serious situation, and I think that your pending applications will most likely be requested to have them move forward, and anything prior would That's my feeling, but you can move forward with any way you want.
So Stephen, you'll be in touch with us.
Yeah, and I'm not,
I mean, you don't have to say yes to your pending, you can just keep them moving and say no. You know, I mean, you have that ability.
yeah, don't, it's my understanding also that we have a majority vote of the board, we can overrule.
You can overrule us.
Yes, so that's what I'm thinking we may have to do.
Well, let's try to get
Well,
everything on the same page
that's
first.
not what I'm here for.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's not what I'm saying.
No, I just
Right.
sense some apprehension.
We know how that works, so we do things around that, skirt around that, so we'll send it back with recommendations. We'll send it back with things that are conditions and recommendations. Just be aware of what you're saying.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right, thank you.
right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Okay, next is the big ticket item for today. Last week, Pio Lombardo was here and he gave us the technical overview of where we are with the wastewater treatment project. Joe kind of walked us through it today. He's going to dumb it down a little even more so everybody really understands exactly what we're looking to do and why we're looking to do it. Then we'll do, right after that, we'll do comments from the public and we'll limit the comments to 3 minutes, please. Before we start, I just wanted, it's kind of a coincidence. Today, the headline in Newsday is the state is looking to make a sewer expansion in all of Suffolk County. The legislators are. They have to present it to the governor. And by increasing the sales tax 0.25%. I'm just going to read what Steve Ballone says is, it is well established that Suffolk County is facing a water quality crisis, and voters should get the opportunity to decide if they want to invest in the infrastructure needed to restore this resource, which is vital to the public health, the economy, and to property values. That's from Steve Ballone. And I would say that certainly what we're trying to do here. Joe?
Thanks. Yeah, I'll start by saying that's totally unrelated to the discussion we're having here today. Quite a coincidence that it was published today, but that is the goal of this project that was just stated to achieve maximum environmental benefit, or one of the goals. So, that it is really relevant. You're right. Pio was here last week. The scope of his presentation was to review two addenda for the engineering report that had been released earlier in 2022. And those two subsequent reports include modeling and analysis in response to the community's concerns and also a general procedure for further due diligence on the project. So the primary work that was done since we last spoke last year, not last week, but that analysis focused on a review of alternative designs and also an environmental impact analysis of the proposed location, groundwater users, both nearby and also in the existing conditions. So they have a presentation here for everyone. If Christina could pull it up. The purpose here is for discussion. So certainly, speaking here to the town board and also the community, if the town board, has any questions, please interject. I think this is the great opportunity for dialogue rather than one-way conversation. And then we can take questions from the public later. Go ahead, please. So just a little outline of what we're going to talk about today. I'll start with project goals and introductions. We'll talk just briefly about what happens with groundwater around here, why projects like this are important, factors that influence groundwater quality, and the goals of this project. I mentioned those already, just touched on them, but largely this is to maximize water quality improvement in both ground and surface waters, and also to implement a sustainable upgrade of the existing municipal building septic systems. That leads right into my next point about a current assessment of our system. For the 7 buildings that we're considering as part of the municipality, we generally have non-conforming systems, meaning they either are antiquated in terms of their technology, treatment ability, or they don't meet current setback distances to property lines, to drinking wells. And so not only are they aging out, but we are faced with this need to replace them from a performance issue and also to rectify these nonconformities so that these municipal buildings can continue to serve the public and have the adaptability to offer those services to the community as the community's needs might change. Then we'll talk about what's proposed, the 16-man Waring location, its layout, the service area, that's largely unchanged. We'll talk about the different treatment types and what's actually coming out of this system. We'll go over the environmental analysis and impact that was done, and we'll dig in a little bit more into that discussion about alternatives. Next, please. So just walking this back towards, high school earth science and a little bit of the groundwater hydrologic cycle. What we have in front of us is what's pretty typical. This is not of Shelter Island, but this is just typical to give folks a sense of what happens to water here. You'll see there's a little bit of a lens, which is the water table below the island surface. That's where we draw our drinking water from exclusively. Rain coming down in the form of precipitation, precipitation percolates through the soil, gets somewhat naturally filtered, enters into the water table. But what's really important here to take away is the arrows on the bottom where you see that groundwater flow as it curves out and outward. So once the fresh water hits the bottom of the freshwater aquifer, it can be met with things like clay layers or impermeable rock. In our case, across most of the island, it's a saltwater aquifer that's below. But at that point, the groundwater flow turns from going straight down and heads outward. This flow pattern is what we see across the island. The highest portion of the aquifer is generally in the center. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But the flow pattern that you see here of water coming in, eventually making its way out to the surrounding areas is what's so relevant to this conversation because the groundwater travels in multiple dimensions. And if you are in the center of the island, you have access to groundwater that lingers for the longest amount of time because it takes longer for it to make its way out of the island. And if you're on the periphery of the island, you are sort of downriver of all the actions that take place closer to the center of the island. So if you have a well and you live near the periphery, closer to the surface waters that surround us, your groundwater is heavily influenced by all of the people participating in the aquifer before you, and that water is traveling down. We'll show a little bit more of that specific model to our locations in a second, but that gives you just a general idea of what's happening beneath us and why these types of projects, why these analysis look at this, and why these types of projects have an impact on our community. Next slide, please. This image just builds upon the last. This is actually the groundwater elevations across Shelter Island. So those contour lines represent 1 foot gradients, but generally what we're looking at here is the center of the island represents the top of that lens. And the groundwater elevation tends to get lower as you get to the periphery, but it's from this information that we can really hone in and understand the nuances of which direction groundwater travels. Water always goes from high to low. And so when you look at the details of these elevation contours, you can start to see specific patterns about where water may start to take a bend, a left turn or a right turn, but it's always generally going to follow that downhill slope. Next slide, please. And then what happens on a very basic and sort of primitive level from this description is that the overwhelming majority of the community derives their water from a private or an individual well, and they dispose of their waste in a private or an individual type wastewater system or septic system. And on a micro level, you're at risk on your specific parcel of putting your well perhaps too close to your wastewater system, and you can negatively impact your own drinking water supply. That's why there are setbacks and distance requirements that we had just mentioned for the municipal parcels here. You don't want your well too close to your septic for the obvious reason that you may be taking up your own sewage. So this is what happens on an individual basis, but you can imagine as we expand this concept to every single parcel and knowing that groundwater flows in many different directions, you may be clear, your well may be clear of your own septic influence, but you may be impacted negatively by your neighbors because your well is too close to your neighbors, or your neighbor just happens to live upstream of you and their wastewater is traveling down towards your well. Next slide, please. So then we'll talk about, why is this actually a problem? The first is that, largely we have a discussion about nitrogen reduction. Nitrogen has been overwhelmingly the conversation piece over the past few decades, and nitrogen largely has been the primary issue and the most impactful issue facing our community. Nitrogen is a natural ingredient in sewage. It's also a pretty powerful fertilizer. It happens to be prolific in all sorts of organic material and decay. So, it's all over the place, but it comes, in our case, lingering in our system because of our wastewater contributions. Other types of communities with different use profiles, there may be industrial sources of nitrogen, there may be agricultural. In our case today, our nitrogen abundance is overwhelmingly because of wastewater contributions. There are other things, obviously, in wastewater that are problematic. Nitrogen is a good indicator of what's in your groundwater because it is the lingering impact that doesn't really break down in the groundwater once it enters there. So if you have high content of nitrogen in your drinking water, it's indicative that your drinking water is influenced by sewage. And there are other issues that come with that. There are, viruses, bacteria, different kinds of disease, other contaminants that tend to travel in wastewater. They vary greatly, but nitrogen can be used as an indicator as to how much wastewater is influencing your drinking water supply. And what happens with nitrogen? Well, the standard for drinking water limits now is 10 milligrams per liter. Those are mandated to us by New York State. They're guided by the EPA, federal agency. But in excess of 10, you're required to have treatment when you have a public water supply. In excess of 5 for a public water supply, you have to have a plan in place for how you're going to address your high nitrogen levels. But in this community where most folks are not on community or public water supplies, there really is no enforcement or even monitoring to help people understand if their drinking water is over these limits or not. And if it is, how do they go about treating it and rectifying it? So the private well situation creates a bit of a public health challenge because of that separation between the private homeowner or the occupant and any connection to monitoring it. The private well owner is responsible for taking their own samples, implementing their own treatment. And that's a fine model, so long as we're being responsible about what, as a community we put in the ground, because it has this impact. Elevated nitrogen levels generally, like most things, impact the most vulnerable the most. Children and older folks tend to have the highest levels of vulnerability, either in development or early development for children, or for elevated cancer rates in older folks. But these impacts can be felt across, age, diversity spectrums. Generally, they are associated with an increased risk of birth defects in women who are pregnant or considering becoming pregnant, developmental issues in young children, and elevated cancer rates throughout the population. They tend to attract issues with thyroid cancer, kidney cancer, adrenal type issues because of their propensity to bind with iodine, et cetera. But those are the...
Bladder, colon, colorectal.
Yeah, exactly. Next slide, please. So then you say, okay, well, do we have a nitrogen problem? Well, here's the heat map about nitrogen. So this modeling was done by the U.S. Geological Survey. It's a common image, but this model was taken by the federal government to help us understand where are the highest concentrations of nitrogen. They produced this heat map. Red is the highest. That's above 10. That's the drinking water standard that we discussed.
Joe, can I just ask a quick question about that?
Yep.
Do you mind if I interrupt?
Go ahead. Yeah.
When above 10, so there's no finer delineation that 19, 20, it's just above 10. is what I mean.
Well, in this map, yes, but you can take a home test, for instance, and they will tell you to the milligram what it is, whether it's 11 or 13.
And we have readings higher than that you know of, or?
We have readings as high as 50, which would be 5 times over the drinking water standard. And that would be considered heavily influenced, probably approaching maybe half of the drinking water supply influenced by wastewater. But totally unsuitable for use.
Yeah.
Cooking, brushing your teeth, drinking,
Yeah.
at that level.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. These are just gradients established by the modeling effort. Greater than 10 got red. So there could be, readings in there of 11 or 25, but still be red. And so anyway, the obvious takeaway here is that the red is concentrated in the center. That's for a couple of reasons. The first, that's where people have been occupying the island for a long period of time. So there's an accumulation of usage and wastewater concentration there. It's also the deepest part of the aquifer and where groundwater travels the slowest. When we refer back to that hydrologic cycle, that's where the rainwater is coming in. It's lingering around for, in some cases upwards of a century before it takes its turn and starts to move out to the extents of the island. So when groundwater doesn't move, it becomes sort of like a stagnant pond. You have no flushing. Everything you put in is accumulating. It's not being digested and bled out properly. And so you have this opportunity for real accumulation of what you put in the ground. Next slide, please. So turning the page a little bit to our existing conditions, what you see here are the parcels that are designated into or adjacent to the service area. The service area are the municipal structures right up here clustered around the 114 traffic circle. School, Legion Hall, Town Hall complex, town-owned residence right next door, police department, justice court, fire department, and the library. And the circles that are around them represent the blue represents the well location, or the teal, I should say, represents the well location. The bullseye that's around that, or the circle that's around that, is the required setback distance. The yellow tiny circles are the septic locations, and the yellow circles around that are the setback distance for septic treatment. So these are our existing conditions, and the purpose of this image is to show you in an area that's populated like this, this type of zoning, implementing or overlaying the required setback distances. You don't have a lot of extra space on the parcels to meet the setback requirements. We'll talk a little bit more about that challenge as we looked at the individual system approach as an alternative. But this is largely the trouble with putting in big systems or even just systems in general on relatively small parcels. You can't quite make it fit within the regulation. So these were done at a time when these setbacks either weren't in place, pre 1970s, or they had to get a variance for approval to put them in. In some cases, you just don't have a choice. You have a parcel that's smaller, and so you have to put it in. But that's a situation up here. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed layout. I'm realizing that the colors are a little bit light for the viewers in the back of the room, but largely what this is showing is that the proposed system down at Manwaring will have a collection system of all of the structures at the top here by the circle to a singular point. And then from that point, they will be consolidated to a single pipe, which will run down 114, make a right on Manwaring Road, and terminate for treatment at the 16 Manwaring town-owned parcel. The treatment plot there, we can go next slide, please. The treatment site there is laid out in detail on the parcel here so that it can meet all county requirements for setbacks to property lines, setbacks to adjacent wells. What are the other setbacks from the road? And this equipment is overwhelmingly underground. So what you see laid out here isn't above ground. The only thing that is above ground, and we've discussed this before, is a control center building, which resembles about a one-car garage, 20 feet by 20 feet. And it controls the valves, monitoring, sampling stations, things of that nature that would be accessed more frequently. And it can be styled more or less any way you like to blend into the character of the neighborhood, or for function. It can be outfitted with solar panels, et cetera, et cetera. You have total flexibility with that. Really what the project needs is just a square footage, about 20 by 20. Next slide, please. So for the environmental impact analysis, which we're actually going to talk about in more detail next week, the specific supplemental environmental review was done by third-party experts on this, PW Grosser. They're going to be presenting their findings more specifically next week. It's going to include a formal final report. But here are bullet points of what was reviewed and evaluated as part of that analysis. So there's a couple here that, obviously require some more work than others. Some are subjective, some are very much objective. So this is just a comprehensive list of what's going to be included in that report. Discussion about water resources and their impact, alternatives analysis, land use, community character, consistency with land use and community plans, ecological resources, energy resources, construction-related impacts. That's things like noise, traffic, sort of the nuances of how you pull this project together, and growth-inducing impacts. What long-term impact, if any, will there be? Next slide, please. So today we'll largely skip over a bunch of those because I'm not the expert on those types of things, and the presentation is forthcoming by the expert. So today I really just want to hone in on the environmental impact as it relates to groundwater influence with the neighbors, possible conflict of flow paths, well users, and talk really about the impact to the overall aquifer health and the consideration of Gardner's Creek. So anyway, this image here is a result of a three-dimensional modeling effort. The basis for it is the elevation data we discussed earlier in the presentation provided by the U.S. Geological Survey. But the lines that you see here represent the flow paths of groundwater for our existing conditions. So each line comes from an existing septic system, be it at the school, town hall complex, police department, fire department, et cetera, et cetera. And what we see here, which maybe a little bit troubling to some, is that the wastewater that currently comes from the buildings closest to the circle, that be the school, the Legion Hall, maybe the library, it's hard to tell exactly, but those facilities are actually contributing wastewater into the head of Menantic Creek. Ironically, Menantic Creek has become a subject of conversation in recent years about declining water quality, declining shellfish activity, harmful algal blooms. And this model actually revealed that significantly more flow from these center buildings is heading towards Menantic Creek than generally had previously been assumed. But that was really just all, until we had the model, that was really relying on local experience and guesstimates, right? So this is the first time, to my knowledge, that we've actually modeled flow paths for septic systems. And as you can see, it relies exclusively on the detailed elevation groundwater contours there. So essentially what's happening is the computer is drawing a line that's exactly perpendicular to the groundwater because, like we said before, groundwater goes from high to low. And these are the patterns that are emerging. We talked earlier in the project life about how being at the center here of the island, the impact is significant and it actually goes in lots of directions. This is the top of the mountain. And so like if you're skiing, when you're at the top, you can make a couple choices that bring you to one side of the mountain or to the other side of the mountain. The further you get down the mountain, it's difficult to change what side of the mountain you're on. Here is a great example. 2/3 of the buildings, their wastewater is going one direction. the rest of the buildings go in the other direction. That's sort of new to us, but it also helps us really understand where the impacted communities are now based on this long-standing activity, who's sort of in harm's way and how to best address this. One thing that jumped out to me from this study is that the schools flow, I'll say the schools flow, but I'm really talking about all of those buildings closest to the school, the town hall and the library. All of that flow that's heading towards Menantic Creek is heading through a very densely populated area. There are a number of homes with tighter parcels in that area. And so those are actually not even represented on here. This is just, those red lines are only from our buildings. But if you can imagine a new red line along that path for every additional septic system, we start to see a pretty troubling pattern towards Menantic Creek where a lot of wastewater flow from a large area is really being channeled into a pretty small estuary, which is getting sort of an unfair shake at being healthy with all of this negative influence. The other thing that comes from this study we can see is that the other buildings traveling towards Shelter Island Sound are actually spending over a century in the ground as they travel from the center towards Shelter Island Sound. They're passing under another area of high density well users, and even our public supply wells, both the West Neck water system and the Shelter Highland Heights water system draw their water primarily, if not exclusively, from the Goat Hill golf course area. And so just like we had said for the school buildings heading towards Menantic, there are many other septic systems along this path from the center of town across Goat Hill. And so if we start to add those lines in, understanding that they follow the same pattern and knowing that it takes over 100 years to make that distance, you've actually got another troubling pattern emerging where this groundwater flow is heading towards where your public drinking water wells are, servicing large numbers of people, relatively speaking, on the island. So what we can really take away from this is that we've really got worst case situation here. The flow patterns that we're seeing cross through the highest density portions of the island tend to be where the most year-round residents live. And they're being concentrated, at least in the Menantic Creek situation, they're being concentrated into one fine point, which really does overstress the ability of the estuary to cope with that nutrient load. Nitrogen, as we talked about before, being a fertilizer, and not to digress a little bit, but that fertilizer, just like it works on your grass, also has the same effect when it enters water bodies. So photosynthetic organisms like algae operate just like plants, but in the water. They take that nutrient just like your grass does, and they use it to explode in growth. And that's that abundance of algae of various types is what degrades water quality. Becomes out of a natural balance. It has an impact on oxygen levels, and that's the degradation in the saltwater environment that we're talking about. So nitrogen not only negatively impacts your drinking water supply, but also has this ability to degrade, the saltwater environment as well. Next slide, please. So the next step in the model was, okay, well, what's the impact of what we're proposing? A big conversation piece was, we're going to be impacting any other groundwater user in the area. Certainly, we don't want that. So we have to do the same kind of flow path modeling for where we're proposing to put this wastewater system in and understand what those impacts are. The red lines are the same flow paths from septic like you saw before. Yep.
Sorry to interrupt, but I just kind of want to make it clear, because to me, this is an important point to make before you do this analysis, which is that flow path also represents 3 milligrams per of nitrogen, like it's a lower concentration. Just want to say that. Like,
Here.
Yeah.
In this one.
Yeah, in this one. I just want that
This
to be.
is projected for
That's
the
what I mean.
municipal
I
plan.
just want to,
Right.
that's important, that it's because you could just look at that and say, all right, well, we're just taking the pollution from here and we're putting it here, but no.
That's right. I think the most important distinction is that the red lines don't consider whether it's 100 milligrams per liter or 3. It's simply the path that it travels.
Right.
In the case of our existing systems, those are effectively untreated. So that is 150 or whatever the raw sewage level is. That can be changed to, say, the individual IA system where it will be reduced. But if we look at I'm jumping ahead a little bit in the presentation. If we look at the individual systems on site, the flow path will stay the same. So you're putting in a new type of system behind the school or at town hall. It's still going to travel towards Manatee Creek. It will be at a lower concentration, but that flow path will stay the same. The model is still relevant. And that applies here as well. At the treatment center, we're talking about an output of 3 milligrams per liter nitrogen and removal of emerging contaminants. That has nothing to do with the shade of red or how wide the band is. It will still travel in the same path, but what it's carrying is different. Is different. So again, the red path is the groundwater flow from wastewater, and the other colors, purple and green, are the modeled pickup areas of the wells in the neighborhood. So the green represent higher production wells. Those happen to be the irrigation wells over at Sylvester Manor. And the purple wells represent more shallow, domestic use type wells. So you'll see immediately to the left and the right of the red lines, those are the neighboring domestic wells for those properties on Manwaring Road. The Good Groundhog well, which is the cottage parcel, has a bit longer of a tail to it. That's because it's a higher production well servicing multiple dwellings on that property. Talking about that tail a little bit, what that really means is the area that tail extends to is where the water is being drawn up for that well. That's the pickup area, like I mentioned before. And what you'll see as a pattern is that it's not grabbing in as wide a range as one might imagine, and that's because of the groundwater elevation change there. You see the contour lines getting closer and closer together. It's sort of accelerating as it reaches the periphery of the island, and so sort of counterintuitively, the well is actually, the water, if you can imagine, the water is actually flowing to the well rather than the well sucking that water up because it's flowing downhill. And that's why we see these distinct patterns here. Now, some might be saying, obviously, okay, I see some crossing of the Sylvester Manor wells as we approach Gardner's Creek with the septic lines. And next slide, please. So we saw that as well. And as I mentioned before, this is a 3-dimensional model. And so we're able to tell whether the flow path actually crosses, and intersects, or if it's just simply overlapping. So for the most part, actually, Christina, could you go back one more, please? For the most part, we see no overlapping whatsoever up until those last two towards the top of the page, which are quite close. That's when we look at the 3-dimensional model. One more slide ahead, please. And we see on the bottom here that, in fact, they are overlapped, but they do not intersect. And so that means that the flow path has gone down to the bottom of the aquifer, and the well does not extend that far deep. It also does not draw water from that deep. And so we can say safely that there is actually no commingling or sharing or exposure to each other.
I have a question for you.
Yep.
Okay, so when we do polls, political polls, we have a plus or minus, a sort of a confidence bracket, I call it. Do you have a confidence bracket on these numbers, or is that possible to get if we don't have it?
Well, I think
It's
plus or minus
10 feet?
No. So the well locations, though, that's information we got from Sylvester Manor. It has to do with their permitting, where they were installed. The private residence wells, that's available through Suffolk County and through well registries. So those are hard numbers. Those are installed.
Flows, the way that, we've mapped the flow.
Yeah. So we would consider this type of separation distance to be significant. This is not something where you're within, a significant margin of error, particularly with the distance away that we're talking about. We're not at any pivotal point. You can see specifically from the bottom model, the trend is clear. The wastewater contributions go down and then turn. By the time they're even approaching these wells, they didn't just reach the bottom. They're a safe distance away.
Well, if we go back one slide, I don't want to hang you up here too much, but I'm just looking at 14 14 Man-Waring Road.
Mhm.
And, okay, I know we're looking at it from a bird's eye view, and that's not an indication of how close, but to an amateur, it looks close. And so there's a confidence that that separation is actually a real separation, is what I'm sort of saying to you on this.
With regard to the wells on the Manwaring, I'll call it on the Manwaring side as opposed to the Sylvester Manor, there's an extremely high level of confidence on that side, particularly because groundwater is flowing away. And so we know that the red lines will not go uphill because the water will not flow uphill, and the contours are so close and the water is moving so quickly that we analyze that to see specifically, is there a risk of what they call mounding, or the water backing up?
Yeah.
No, that is not the case. That's based off of the groundwater contours, which we don't make up. That's provided for us through extensive modeling, USGS, and also with the soil characteristics, understanding how water flows through the soil. There's certain types of soil like sand or gravel or clay, water passes through faster or slower. That's incorporated into the model. So we know site-specific or relatively site-specific data, and that those things aren't a risk. Next slide, please. Next slide. So, okay, just moving past the groundwater flow, we looked at the impact of Gardner's Creek. This is a horrible slide for trying to read anything off of here. It's small numbers, but I only included it here as a conversation piece about how we analyzed impact of Gardner's Creek. So we started with a list of all of the properties that fall within the Gardner's Creek watershed, people who either live in a residential place or commercial place. We took all the data from the assessor's office, any parcel that is within an impact range to Gardner's Creek, and we assessed what activity is going on there. So you can go to the next slide, Christina. It's just another table, but it's the same table that was on the slide before. We looked at the address, we looked at the size of the property, we looked at what buildings were there. We generated their wastewater flow based on the usage. If it was a restaurant, it was a higher flow amount with also a higher concentration. If it was a residential house, we assessed with residential concentrations. Next slide. And we added that all up to understand what is the relative impact based off of activities that are going on there now, and then reassessed our impact as to how it relates. What are we putting in the equivalent of 15 homes worth of activity, and how does the health of the creek respond to what's already there? And what we have understood from evaluating every single parcel is that the nitrogen concentration from the proposed treatment at 16 Manwaring represents a 1.4% increase in total nitrogen from wastewater that the creek currently receives. And that is an equivalent to about 1.3 houses traditional septic system. Some might say 1.4%, that's a positive increase. And that would be correct. It's a 1.4% increase. But we examined over 50 parcels that are within the watershed. And we also examined the scale with which wastewater is impacting Gardner's Creek. We did not add in the 1.4% only is in relation to wastewater. So there are other nitrogen contributions. There are fertilizers from lawns. There's nitrogen coming in the form of rain. There's fertilizers coming from the agricultural activities at Sylvester Manor. 1.4% is not even part of those. It's simply related to the wastewater contributions in the area. And as I said, it translates to 1.3 homes of conventional septic.
So not to find a point on it, if we did not build a wastewater treatment plant here, we have a town-owned piece of property that we potentially could put a house and an accessory dwelling on for our affordable housing program. And that would contribute pretty much the same, maybe.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
Pretty close.
So the creek is impacted in a similar way.
Yeah, nearly the same. And the extension of this, really, you'd say, is if this if this is too much for the community appetite to Gardner's Creek, you'd have to then also extend that policy to the rest of the watershed. So, if this was in fact too much based off of, the analysis, then you also conceivably should not build anymore in the watershed. Any of those 50 some odd parcels, some of them are vacant. Those would have to be, isolated from development if your intention was to keep nitrogen contribution the same. If that was the road.
To reduce it to encourage IAs.
Right. Yeah. And so this model also looked at IAs that are in the watershed. So if a residence had or a commercial property had already put an IA system in, that was considered as part of this. Next slide, please. So we can review the individual system approach. What we considered largely, and what we'll talk about today, are the costs, the viability from a regulatory perspective, and the performance differences. The next slide, please. Cost. So one challenge in costing the two options is that they're not apples to apples. With centralized treatment, you have the opportunity to adapt to different requirements, also to treat for things that don't normally get treated for IA systems, like emerging contaminants. And so we price these in such a way that they would be totally equivalent in terms of output. Ultimately, that's what we're pricing, either pounds of nitrogen removed or effluent quality. And so looking at the individual system, aside from complexities of receiving variances and whatnot, we find that to achieve equivalent treatment, the costs are pretty close. We see less than a 1% difference in the total price. Now, reasonably, you likely wouldn't do a lot of these options for the individual system. You would be making the trade-off, as sort of a consolation for a cheaper project, your treatment. If you went with just individual IA systems and you didn't make it apples to apples, you talk about apples to oranges, you settled for lower quality treatment, you would see this project in probably the low 2 million range. So yes, there is the cheaper option, and we thought it helpful to present in both ways. If the effluent quality is apples to apples, you see that it's about equivalent cost. If you are willing to concede effluent quality for one reason or the other, and you just simply went with base, IA technology, you'd have probably $750,000 difference in the system cost. Next slide, please. Aside from costs, and not factored into costs, are the regulatory challenges which we discussed. So we mentioned earlier that there are property line setbacks, well setback distances, et cetera, et cetera. So we explored that and what would happen and how would we go about individual systems on all these town parcels. And this list here shows you what those variances would need to be. So the yellow indicates that the parcel needs a variance to fit the system. We tried to fit a system on every parcel, and these are the required setbacks that you'd have. We don't need to go through them all today, but what you see here is that's, the yellow ones, some property line setbacks, some well separation distance setbacks, et cetera, et cetera. This is quite a high number of variances to achieve in one project. It's not to say that they all can't be achieved, but this is a significant challenge.
Just a question about clarification. So I'm for commercial, I'm used to the standard being 200 feet from a well. Now, because these are municipal buildings or, isn't it supposed to be 200 feet from a well in setback or?
Yeah, so this represents our current registration, not necessarily what they should be. So in fact, you're right. Yes, those would be a little bit trickier. And there is sort of a looming option to eliminate the well issues, and that is to get rid of individual wells serving each parcel and centralize them. One or two wells situated at a place that was out of the way. That would then service, multiple buildings. That's effectively a public water supply. That is an option to combat these issues, but it comes at a cost and a complexity. We looked at that as a comparison, And we've explored it both from a partnership with, say, Suffolk County Water Authority, who could install and operate the system, also privately. And the lowest cost option is about $500,000 to do something like that, $500,000 to $700,000 to install, a larger public supply well, to run all of the lines to the respective buildings, have treatment, to meet the standards for a more robust public supply system. And like I said, that's an option, but it does come at a cost, and that's not reflected in the cost comparison that we just discussed. Next slide, please. So really just a rundown on performance and what you get. We're talking about the centralized system. The particular treatment technique that we're using has a 3 milligram per liter established performance record with comparable conditions, schools, public spaces with high concentration waste. You have the opportunity for the removal of emerging contaminants, many of which I put unknowns there, ... many of which we don't know yet. But what I wanted to emphasize, which is the next bullet point, is the adaptability of the system. Some have looked at this project and said you're paying a large portion of the funds towards pipe, and pipe doesn't treat nitrogen, and that's correct, and it's base statement. But what the pipe does by centralizing this treatment is gives you the opportunity to adapt in the future when the community's needs or regulatory demands require it. One situation like this that we're seeing play out is that we have individual systems widespread throughout the island. We've been talking about nitrogen problems for decades. The reason why, or part of the reason why it takes so long, is because we're changing every single one of those with the latest technology. Likely in a few years, if not a few decades, there'll be another challenge, and we will have to go through that rendition again to replace every single one of these. Now, this system doesn't incorporate the whole island, not even close, but centralized in practice gives you the opportunity to change those in one spot as your needs change. They could either be changed or they could be added on. The fact that you have that infrastructure is what gives you the adaptability. If you're looking at individual systems, you have to replace every single one or upgrade every single one, and you lose the economies of scale. So yes, the pipe doesn't treat nitrogen, but the pipe is a pathway, no pun intended, to adaptability for future treatment options.
Well, because when we first, the first early parts of this, of the engineering on this system, one of the objections was that treating PFAS in particular with what was suggested could in itself cause unintended and bad toxic outcomes. So it's not only it's adaptability not only to the unknown pollutants that might be coming down the pike or new regulations, but I'm hoping that the system, correct me, can be adapted for new treatment possibilities. Like, in other words, if the current known treatment is not a good one, because that was sort of brought up, I don't know how, in the objections or by someone in the public, maybe it was Dr. Goldberg, I'm not really sure, that the treatment itself of an emerging contaminant could result in an effluent that has a bad thing in it, that this system in the future could be adapted to a better treatment. There's room here, theoretically in the building. It's a simple, a bit basic. I know it's low level here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The specifics of what you're mentioning were with criticisms of using UV technology as a way to treat emerging contaminants. And, emerging contaminants is a wide range. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know what's the phrase, not every shoe fits each foot, or but this it's a change. Certainly it's a changing field, yeah. Not only in treatment, but also in risks. Mm-hmm. PFAS is something that nobody talked about not very long ago, and all of a sudden it's of primary concern. Mm-hmm. So adaptability there is the value, and I think I would hone in on the adaptability aspect rather than the specific technology that was proposed. That I don't want to say it was a placeholder, but that's trying to represent your options for changing as this field progresses.
Well, it's sort of like being on chemo long enough to hope for the next drug to come down the pipe, right? It's the same
I hate to
idea.
put it like that. It's not,
Some of us live in that world.
And honing in one more time on the adaptability is that we have the opportunity for reuse quality, reuse quantity of wastewater, such that we could potentially remove it from the groundwater flow path altogether. This community is showing a propensity for increased water demand across the spectrum. More people are residing here, more people are building here. Places like Gardner's Bay Country Club are looking to expand irrigation. This is an opportunity to really double down on water savings and meet other entities and parties' needs with something that we would normally discard or that is potentially causing problems. This wastewater goes in the ground right now. It's causing drinking water contamination, and it could be channeled to be totally productive for some other user on the island. The IA option, residential IA systems are mandated to be at 19 milligrams per liter, twice the current drinking water standard of 10. Commercial systems are required at 10, and it depends on how much how much your output is on a daily level. So the school actually falls within the 10 milligram per liter. What we talk about sort of ubiquitously across the island for residential systems, that's 19. So the treatment is substantially lower than what's coming out, but also substantially higher than what could be achieved if you chose the maximum treatment level. Emerging contaminants for IA systems, I wanted to emphasize that it's not impossible. It's just something that lacks practicality. And I say that because you lack the ability to treat sort of in one place with centralizing. So you're talking about treatment systems that are broken up and segmented to the individual one. So it'd be 7 parcels, that's 7 different systems. It's expensive to implement those. And you have to say, well, some of these smaller flow buildings, perhaps that doesn't make sense, to spend for the treatment at the library when, say, the school is the big fish that's got a lot, that's where I want to invest my resources. So it's not to say that it's not possible. It just becomes something that's more difficult to manage and perhaps makes less sense. One major advantage is there's really no additional infrastructure to the IA systems. You're talking about replacements on those existing parcels, no pipes in the street, no usage of the 16-man wearing parcel. But you do have those regulatory challenges, variances needed for the setbacks and potentially well relocations. Well relocations on your own parcel for the sake of making it fit, but there's also the possibility that private wells would need to be relocated. And we've identified a few of those, which would likely drive the cost of the project as well. Next slide, please. Oh, here's, okay, yeah, thought these are a little bit relevant. Suffolk Times article back in October in Orient, Water Quality Advisory. This was a PFAS-related issue. So Orient, similar to here, has a very limited public water supply area. They're largely on private wells. And just last year, Suffolk County Health Department had done some testing about PFAS levels. And it turned out that a big portion of the downtown area was exceeding the current PFAS standards. They were working with these property owners to understand what the extent of the area was. They were the state was issuing them bottled drinking water as a substitute. But the reason why I brought this up is because it happened so quickly. Sort of for a lot of people there, they just sort of found out overnight, we have this drinking water problem. They had made a lot of investment into IA systems in the area, and this is something that potentially could have. It's very much unfolding now, and so what will happen there will be, I think, an interesting case study for how other similar communities will face drinking water quality problems in terms of water delivery. Are they going to stick with this private model and do filtration at everybody's home, or will they move towards public water systems? Will they move towards wastewater treatment? That's yet to be seen. But the second article is something that came out just a couple of weeks ago, in that the EPA, through the Biden administration, is proposing a restriction on the same PFAS, cancer-causing forever chemicals. And so we're looking to see those come down on the drinking water side, probably imminently. Next slide, please. And so here's actually the final slide before we go to questions. But John Cronin and one of the town engineering department interns several years back had done a model of nitrogen in the center area aquifer. They were trying to understand how many at the time IA systems needed to be put in the center district, the center triangle area, and then eventually across the island to help reduce the groundwater nitrogen levels. And so I updated this model to understand and visually demonstrate what path we're on and what paths we can take. So the red line that's extending up in the upward way, that's your current no action situation. That's if no IA systems are implemented, we continue to put in the nitrogen levels and untreated wastewater that we have. You're seeing a 2.7% annual surplus. When we model this for individual IA systems, we see a slight deficit, about 0.3%, less than half a percent, kind of like your break-even situation. I called it break-even because this is based off of 2018 nitrogen data. So we were kind of within the margin of error, but a huge improvement. I mean, when you're looking at that, you're saying, hey, I stopped the problem. And then when we model the centralized treatment with the highest level of nitrogen reduction, you're seeing a 1.3% deficit in nitrogen. So that's the situation where you're reversing the curve. You're actually lowering the nitrogen level in groundwater, the base nitrogen level. Yeah.
But this doesn't even address what Monantic Creek, I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Well, this impacts everything. I mean, if
Yeah.
you reverse the curve and you start to reduce the overall nitrate level in the groundwater itself, that spreads out from there. So you're reducing it
Right, but I think the
island-wide.
impact, that purple line would be even a steeper. Am I right about that? A decline of what's going into.
Well, if you look at a specific area, yeah.
Right, yeah.
And we would expect that you'd see, so, and we talked about those long travel times, 100 years, 35 years. What we would expect to see is a progressive improvement. So whoever's closest to the source is going to see improvement first. And that could be on a pretty fast scale, a matter of, certainly a matter of years, you'd see those numbers start to decline, not be resolved, but that'd be the pattern and the path that the improvements would happen, would travel outward. So it would take in the case of Monantic Creek, we're talking about 33 years before it would get to there. But at year 10, you're on your way, and that's a progressive stream. So that's the end of my presentation. I think, right? Next slide.
Yes. Thanks, Joe.
Okay. Any questions from the town board before we?
I think I'm good. Sorry about interrupting.
Okay, you guys want to take a 2-minute break or you want to get going? Keep going? Okay, I mean, I'm fine. Okay, all right.
Feel free to
We have a
interrupt
list,
me
Christina,
anytime.
or is there a list or just?
Christina, I have a question. Will this be on the website, what Joe just did? It's a sort of simplified version of what's there, right? In case anybody.
Okay, we'll start with people in the audience. Howard Johansson?
Afternoon. Thank you. Joe, I thought that was an excellent presentation. Told us where we are and where we want to go. I just have a couple of things that I'd like to discuss, so have clarified so one is in the original, when we were talking about Clinic Field. Field. said that the majority or predominantly all of the flow from the center of town was going in that direction to Cockles Harbor. And I just was wondering how all of a sudden, I mean, it might be this new modeling. I'm not familiar with the new modeling that just came out, but all of a sudden we made a 180-degree change. So I just want to know, how was that modeling done?
Could we pull up the presentation again, Christina? And could we go to the that original groundwater elevation table at the beginning, the white image? So that's a really good question, Howard. Yeah, that's the one. And what I want to point out, Howard, is that being at the center. Yeah, that either one's fine. Okay, that one's good. So we talked about being at the top of the mountain and how that has the biggest influence. That's your opportunity to go in many different directions. A small turn takes you to the other side. A small turn the opposite way, you're 180 degrees away. Based off of the groundwater elevations, we were really at that tipping point where you could go to the right towards Cockles Harbor, or towards any of these other directions. And I think the evidence of that is the split that we have now. You see that the school buildings are going towards Manana Creek, and just a couple hundred feet down, you're going out towards Shelter Island Sound. When we had the original discussion about Clenowickis, we had said, hey, I actually think what's going on here, you're going a little bit in every direction to all of those different water bodies. And the modeling is showing that it's a little bit less spread out than we thought. It's actually more confined, but still splitting off. We're just favoring that one side of the island than the other. And, that's why you do the modeling.
Is that modeling described in the addendum 1 or 2?
Yeah.
I mean, I see the results in the report.
Yep.
It's actually how the modeling was done.
It was, yes, and it was done by an independent hydrogeologist who specializes in hydrogeographic modeling in the Northeast. Does a lot of work for Cape Cod. His name is Tom Carberari, and he was contracted separately to take data from the USGS, take the design proposal from us, and to model the impact. So these are actually his findings, not PO's, not my own. All of the modeling effort was done by a third party.
And that's what is in those 2 addendums.
Yep. And at the end, actually, of addendum 2 are these black slides here. That was a deliverable from Tom. Yeah, so it's included as an
I
appendix.
just didn't understand how come it was 180 degree completely.
Yeah.
So that was the one question. My other question was, have we been given the PBS report from the education department showing the UD engineers report for the school, which cost $800,000? That system would cost $800,000.
What's PBS?
That's the architect.
BBS,
BB.
BBS,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're the big firm I know of.
yeah. That's the one
That would be a question for the school district.
we haven't looked at that to see viability of the Fuji system.
Oh, no, certainly. That design's not done yet. That's a decision that they're wavering on whether to, commit to doing that work. But we met with that firm when we first kicked off the project to understand what their intentions were, how they were to approach it. One thing that jumped out to us was that that's not a widely established practice. Fuji doing these school installations, and in fact, Meg could actually probably speak more. But we certainly know that the firm that was proposing this, I think this was their first go around for high concentration at a school. So there were concerns about performance with this type of system as well. They were recommending four units, wasn't it? 4 units. Yeah, 4 units to try and achieve the effluent output that they had to guarantee. But like we said, that was preliminary design. They've not done the design yet.
If we didn't have COVID, that would be installed by now.
I don't know.
Because they said the end of 22, the installation would be there.
Yeah.
And I'm just questioning, I've never seen that report. I don't know if it's available to us. like to read.
I'm not aware of any report that was produced. I know they have a plan, but I'm not aware of any analysis that was done on that behalf.
I could get that.
School.
The board.
I guess the school board, yeah.
So we'll talk to
Here.
Yeah, you want me to just,
No, let's keep going.
my two main points are, thought that I would love to see more central systems. I mean, we're gonna need them, and we're also gonna need a central water system. So it's just a matter of when and how long we can delay it to get monies to do those projects. So that's our biggest problem, getting financing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Howard.
Next on the list is Bob Cohen.
Before you start the clock, given the length of the presentation and the fact that I didn't hear any town board members ask any critical questions of the engineer, I'd like your permission to extend my remarks to 4 minutes.
And Bob, if you don't get done, no, seriously, sit and we'll get back to you, okay?
The answer is no.
Well, no,
Start with the
I'm
three.
just
Let's get
saying,
going.
yeah, let's just get going, but you'll get another shot.
Last week, you promised to provide an apples-to-apples comparison of the marginal benefits and costs of the two alternative means of treating the wastewater in town center, the localized system of IA systems and moving the waste uptown and building a treatment plant on Mad Waring. Since the third alternative, doing nothing, is not on the table, the cost of doing nothing should not be part of the calculus for the decision before the town. As to the true marginal costs and marginal benefits that has still not been provided in any convincing way, even after today's presentation.
Could I just stop, could we just pause you and I'll...
No.
You did do it.
Let me finish.
Let him finish. Got his 3
Let
minutes.
me finish. You state that the cost of the man-wearing alternative would be about $3.1 million. But we know, and you have it in your chart, that about $1.4 million of that cost, nearly half, would be the cost of collecting and transporting the waste to man-wearing site. According to Professor Gobler, installing the individual IA systems will cost less than $1 million, no matter what imagined technical or legal obstacles you throw at that alternative. No one believes your $3 million number, not even yourself. You said that if to do a lower amount of nitrate and a sufficient amount of nitrate, it would be $2 million. This is not about maximizing environmental benefit, as you said. That's never been the goal. It's about doing the optimal amount of nitrogen reduction given the costs. Now, even assuming a $2 million cost of the Man-Waring project over the individual IA systems, okay, so it would be about $1 million, according to your own numbers, that it would cost $1 million more. That's the cost side. Now, what about the benefits? What's the marginal benefit of the Man-Waring project? It is not, as you and Mr. Lombardo said, a 98.6% reduction in nitrogen, because that is the marginal benefit against doing nothing. But doing nothing is not on the table. What's on the table is the localized individual IA systems. The lowest estimate I've seen for these systems is that they reduce nitrogen by 97%. So the true marginal benefit of the Man-Waring project over the IA systems is no more than a 2% reduction. And a matter of fact, your own chart, I think I saw earlier, talked about a 1% marginal reduction. If I understood
What are you
that.
talking about, Bob? That doesn't even make any sense.
No study has been presented showing that an additional 2% nitrogen reduction would have any health benefits whatsoever. Indeed, you just proved that you're going to be increasing the nitrogen output to Gardner's Creek by 1.4%. So if it's okay to increase Gardner's Creek by 1.4% and there's no health benefit, no health detriment to that at all, the extra 2% that you're asking to do has no marginal health benefit to its cost.
Bob, your time's up. We'll come back to you. We'll come back to you.
Oh, come on. This is an important subject.
Down.
It is important. Does anyone else on the board give me another 30 seconds to finish?
You're coming back. You're coming back. You'll be able to finish, no worries.
Right, I'm going to respond to Mr. Cohen's.
No, you're not going to respond.
Bob, this is our meeting.
Let somebody else
Sit
talk.
down. I will let people talk. I run the meeting. You sit down. You sit down.
You talk about, I am not a bully.
I'm not a bull. Grow up, will you please? Sit down.
What's the matter with you?
Bob Cohen made a statement that obviously was written before Joe made his presentation, because all your statements were answered in his
That's
presentation.
incorrect.
Okay.
I was taking notes. How would you note such a thing?
Next
Are you a
time.
mind reader?
Jeannie,
Wait a minute, I just want to.
Jeannie's gonna pass.
I just want.
Next, Linda McCarthy.
I just want to say something.
Lucky me.
Just everybody to know, what does $1 million mean in terms of a differential, if you want to accept that number? Just $1 million, 20 years amortization, if you borrowed the money, would mean just approximately per property, without bringing values into it, would be about $17 a year. So just when we talk about, poisoning the children versus not. I just wanted to put that in a little perspective.
Let me just clarify, briefly. There are a lot of numbers there that don't quite, they contradict what we presented today, but the comment about the school system independently is approximately $1 million, and that's not including the 6 other parcels. So just for a sense of scale, that's a hard number that they came to us, with. So, that's a benchmark. Sorry, go ahead.
No worries. Okay, Linda McCarthy, 129 South Midway Road. And the family house, 18B South Midway Road, which is on Menantic Creek. So when I saw the map of the island showing the path of the central waste and how 80% of it ends up at the head of Menantic Creek, I thought, well, that explains it. In my lifetime on this creek, I've watched the quality of the water decline year after year. It used to be a vibrant nursery for sea creatures, but not anymore. We've been raising oysters there for 17 years at the dock. We just lifted them up from their winter resting place and noticed a 25% die-off since the fall. It's definitely not getting any better. Then I looked again at this map and saw that the waste path goes past a number of private homes who have wells that pull water on this waste stream, whose drinking water must be adversely affected. For those of us in real estate, we need to provide buyers with homes that have potable or drinkable water. These homeowners on this waste stream can't have that. Can't see how they could. What will they do if they need or want to sell? Not to mention their own need for safe drinking water. I think it's our responsibility as a community to choose a course of action that will give us the best possible outcome for our island, to retain the integrity of its single source aquifer and help our saltwater creeks and bays to restore themselves. I believe that you have found a solution. I fully support moving forward with this central system. It'll give us control, the ability to monitor. It'll allow for adjustments as our community may change. In addition, I believe that it removes the chemicals, and it can or will remove the chemicals and carcinogens that the IA systems do not. Is that correct? I'd like to thank all of you guys and the community members for diligently researching and providing us with thorough information to make an educated decision as to the best way for us to proceed as a community that is thinking towards that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Elizabeth, I guess you crossed it out.
Cross that out.
Yeah.
And then add.
Alex Dupree? Alex?
I want to thank you all. I mean, I saw that map as well, and I freaked out. But I want to thank you for presenting all this information to us, and for the information at last meeting. I've been going through it since then endlessly. I spent my entire life on and around Menantic Creek. I live at 16B South Midway Road. The dramatic changes in the creek, as Linda said, from a creek full of life to the minimal life we find in the creek today, has been devastating to observe. It seems that the modeling presented at the last meeting provides some valuable insight into some of what has been happening over the past years. We on Menantic Creek have been in conversation with the WAC and NO over the past years regarding our concerns about the very significant deterioration of water conditions and loss of life in Menantic Creek. We have formed a neighborhood group, the Menantic Creek Keepers, and we have been and continue to seek ways to understand and evaluate what we've been observing in the creek in order to find ways to stop the degradation and hopefully develop strategies to improve the water quality in the creek. We are hoping that this new information will help us focus on next steps and increased efforts in partnership with the WAC and the town to protect and revitalize Menantic Creek. The modeling study and addenda clearly show that the Menantic watershed is most directly impacted by waste flowing from the area surrounding the center circle. It's a real eye-opener. For although we've been very aware of the water quality issues in the center, and we were all extremely concerned about our drinking water quality, we never connected the center water quality issues so directly with the deterioration we observed in Menantic Creek. We know from testing recently, our own wells here near the center, that in addition to nitrogen, these waste streams contain many harmful or untested compounds. We are very excited and encouraged that the town is moving positively with a new central system to stop the existing flow, which is dumping on our neighborhood, our wells, and the Menantic Creek estuary. This is truly a wonderful opportunity and a very important first step to help clean up the center area and the Menantic watershed. The installation of this system will positively affect all the homes and wells along the existing flow paths. We're also extremely glad to see that the studies show that the flow from the proposed central wastewater treatment system on Menmoring Road toward Gardner's Creek will not impact adjacent wells there or the creek, as we have been and continue to be impacted by the existing flow. The proposed wastewater treatment system will be a positive for all of us that will address current known wastewater conditions, will best position us to monitor ongoing system operations, and will provide maximum flexibility needed to address future treatment needs and requirements as they are identified. It will also provide opportunities for reuse, which will further support efforts to protect our wells and essential water supplies. We know that there continues to be discussion of individual IA systems instead of the central system. Please know that we endorse the installation of nitrogen-reducing IA systems, and many of us have installed them at our homes on Menantic Creek. However, in this case, this is not an apples-to-apples comparison. Individual IA systems.
Alex, you got to wrap up, okay?
Okay, I'm on my last sentence. Individual IA systems are neither sufficient nor flexible enough to provide additional treatment which may be needed to treat for other compounds beyond nitrogen content to achieve the much needed results to clean up the center, stop the flow to the Menantic watershed, and move forward with efforts to be sure we all have safe, potable drinking water in all of our homes. We need to invest in the best possible system for the future. Thank you again, and please know we fully support your efforts to move forward with the central system.
Thank you. Next on the sign-in sheet, Marion. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I am in favor of the central system. I'm hoping that it will be sized so that the other businesses and residences along the route can be tied in the future. And maybe some in that direction too. That's all.
Thank you. That's all I have for the sign. Anybody else in the room want to speak before we go to the Zoom audience? We have anybody?
Back to Bob and Zoom.
Loda?
Yeah.
Yeah, come on up. You have to come up. Come on. Christian, you come up.
You don't say what you're gonna
say.
Yeah, you don't get picked up on the mics otherwise, that's why.
There's a lot of people on Zoom today.
How's it going? I'm all in favor of.
Just identify yourself for the public, please.
I'm Christian Clark. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Do you guys have any concerns about like the wastewater flow and maintaining how the wastewater recharges the groundwater? Because if you're taking thousands of gallons of water and moving it to a different watershed, is that going to alter your groundwater levels in the center?
Yeah, good question. Certainly, we rely on that process, put it back in the ground after you take it out. And so we did look at specifically this quantity of water, that particular distance. It's an insignificant volume. We'd be needing a substantially larger quantity to have any noticeable impact. And that model was actually a second run at that was done by Suffolk County Water Authority. They're sort of the experts in that kind of study.
Yep.
They did that independently and they found the same thing.
Okay.
Yep.
Another question, just out of curiosity, why if like Fisk's Field would be an option, just because it's so much closer? It's downhill, it's going the water's going in the same direction, and it's still cleaning the water, just seems like a more sensible option and probably a lot cheaper too. So.
Yeah, Fisk Field was seriously considered. From an environmental standpoint, you're right, huge improvement, and the proximity is very relevant. That wouldn't really change these flow paths either. We'd still be going in the same, more or less the same directions. That would still be, a big improvement.
Yep.
When we're talking about maximum impact, we've got to get it out of this little center territory. Mm-hmm. The other issue that specifically is relevant to Fisk Field is that it likely would have a disruption to the functionality of the field. Because of setbacks, it would have to be right in the center.
Okay.
And being in the center, we were worried about the impact to recreational use of the field. It's underground, but it's not the kind of thing you'd be playing baseball on top of. So those challenges, really took it out of consideration.
One more question, is the size of the system you're planning on putting in, are you putting an oversized system that's gonna or are you putting a system that's just gonna manage the municipal buildings, or is it gonna be for future plans that the town might have?
That's also a really excellent question, because you have to sort of walk the line on that. Obviously, you don't invest in this kind of infrastructure to not have capacity for tomorrow. So you have to allow for some additional use. In the case of municipal buildings, the use might change. There may be more kids in the school year on year. There may be more offices at town hall. So it's really a twofold answer. The first is there's a little bit of contingency in the daily flow now for change of use of these existing buildings like we discussed.
Okay.
The other bigger answer to that question is that the site has a maximum amount. So it's not possible to service the entire island and send it all to one spot. There's a known fixed maximum capacity just simply based off the space and how much treatment you can achieve in that given space. And it's not that much more.
Yeah, okay. And it's just town buildings going on there too, right? No.
Town-owned buildings, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Hey, Christian, I got one for you.
Yeah.
Christian owns a business on the corner. In today's, White Oak Farms. In today's reporter, you weren't quoted, but your neighbors referenced you that you're concerned about loss of business if we have to dig the road up.
I am concerned that I was going to just save that for another meeting, but project and timing, if you're digging up my whole property, obviously people can't get in there. I can't operate. Property values of the surrounding neighborhood are probably going to adjust if you're living next to a sewage plant. So that was one other topic I had, but yeah. So
Thank you.
all right, thanks.
Okay, anybody else in the audience?
Hi, I'm Peter Grand. I'm the chair of the Water Advisory Committee. I think that there are a couple of big picture things that just need to be underlined. The first is that red blotch in the center of the diagram, the nitrogen diagram that Joe presented, what it is, that's a fairly large red blotch, and it's above 10 milligrams of nitrogen per liter. So what that is telling us is that residents in the center have already lost potable water. We have non-potable water. In 2016, the USGS did our baseline studies of nitrogen and other contaminants in the center, and they'd established at that point that we were above 10 milligrams of nitrogen per liter in the center. Now, these nice folks who live on Menantic Creek, they know there's nothing you can do for them for 30 years. There's a river of sludge heading their way for 30 years, and there's really nothing that's going to stop that. The situation is a little different in the center. As Joe pointed out, across School Street, maybe it's only a few months until you're impacted over there. Across Smith Street, maybe a year or two. By the time you get to Commander Cody's, maybe you're 5 years before we improve the water quality in that zone. These folks have no potable water now, and the only option for supplying them with potable water will be water that will need to be sourced near the center. As far as I know, most likely at this point at Sachem's Woods, which was covenanted originally for that particular purpose. Those lines of the other 20% of waste, however, are heading in that direction. Water from these buildings over here are headed precisely in that direction, where we will need to source potable water for near center buildings. It's not just sourcing water for the near center folks. Even people in the near shore area are going to need to ultimately source public water. Those who are losing water because of losing potable water, not because of nitrogen, but because of saltwater intrusion, will also have to get their water near center, because it is not possible to put public water supplies near shore. So the center area has to become a protection zone, a water supply protection zone. So it's crucial to do more than just simply slow down the rate of damage. We have to bend the curve the way you saw that purple line going. And like a donut, we need to clear out from the center outward. We'll need to be supplying water. We'll need to be putting more and more fresh water into the center to continue the flushing process. And we will need to have a water protection zone in the center. Now, all that said, I'm not particularly happy about replacing a flow to Monanta Creek to flow into Gardner's Creek. No creek should be impacted. And the second point that Joe is making is that this system begins to allow us the process of going for reuse. And if you've read Carl Grossman in the last couple of weeks in the Shelter Island Reporter, you'll see that for both Suffolk County, at Riverhead, it's being done right now using golf courses. And we have dance partners for that particular equation. So we're heading.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience? Erica?
Before Erica, I just want to, Christian, you brought up a good point about expansion. So it's limited by the site, but it's also, because it's municipal buildings, we don't have to establish what's called a municipal wastewater treatment sewage district. But if you go outside of municipal buildings, so if we wanted to hook up any of the commercial or residentials outside, we would have to establish that. And that's a whole public, that's a referendum, that's a big deal. So in other words, it wouldn't just happen. You know,
Yeah, that's what I
we wouldn't just hype it, make it bigger, and, you know, it's done deal. So there's some protection, I just want you to kind of feel that.
Yep.
Sorry, Erica.
Hey, I'm Erica Laspia. I live at a neighboring property to the proposed treatment plant. I just feel like there's been a bit of a straw man argument presented here today in terms of the nitrogen issue, because it's certainly not the feeling that most of us have that are opposed to this particular plant, that we don't recognize that there's a dire issue with water and water quality and wanting to try to fix that. And that's sort of how things were presented and how people have responded. We know that, we feel that, we want the problem solved. We just don't like this particular method of solving it. And as Christian brought up, our property values are going to be devastated. You know, forget the property values of the people that might want to, you know, in terms of real estate, I believe Ms. McCarthy brought up, you know, that's difficult for those in real estate. Those of us neighboring this plant are going to have devastated property values, and that's a huge issue. And that's sort of being discounted here. And you're really impacting a lot of people's lives in a very detrimental way when there are other methods of solving this problem that have not been fully vetted. We've heard a lot of contradictory science over the past, 6 months. And I don't think most of us feel confident that this is the best solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Trish Gallagher?
That would be me. I hate talking in front of crowds, so please put up with me. And I'd like to thank the town incredibly for a wonderful presentation. I missed your name because I was late. I'm a research scientist and practitioner at Columbia University Medical Center, but I live full-time doing telehealth. And with occasional trips in the city, I've lived here for 35 years. Here's the deal. I am terribly concerned about the health risks that this effluent problem has caused, certainly in the town center. I looked at your faces, you looked shocked when you found out that the concentration of nitrites was 10% or more. And I'd like to follow up on what you were saying. Nitrites do cause cancers, in particular thyroid, gastrointestinal cancers, disorders, which are a nightmare. They cause miscarriages, birth defects. This is a serious deal, and we've got to get on top of it before it hits where I live, which is just up the road from the McCarthys. So has the Menantre Creek been tested? I don't know. I'm going to finish though. Just, you might want to jot this down. Has it been tested for nitrates? Has it been tested for other things like benzene? I don't know, petroleum, oil, whatever could get into there. I think we need to do that testing. I watched also the ecosystem pathetically decline over the past 30 years, and it just breaks my heart. Okay. That's it. Sorry. Oh, and I'm thinking at this point, the effluent actually is in Menantre Creek. It's not just on its way with this great surge. It's there. And my good friends who live on the creek, I value them. I don't want them to die horrible deaths. Thank you for drinking non-potable water. I'm wondering if the town is in compliance with the Federal Clean Water Act. And I'm also wondering if this constitutes an environmental violation. Because from what I've learned very quickly, this is out of my bailiwick. I don't totally know what I'm talking about, but it seems to me that this is an environmental violation. So we have to get on it and just make it really clear that we are trying to do things. We're going to wind up quite possibly with class action federal lawsuit. That's it.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Anybody else in the audience before we go to the Zoom?
I'm Kelsey McIntosh. I fully support this. I think you guys did a great job. Just quickly, I think that it's like easier said to tell individual, like, I would like you guys to educate, if you can, individuals in the community on what they can do personally to prevent less nitrogen going through their septic systems. It's easy to put a Band-Aid on things, and this is like a great start. But like, the world's in a pretty brutal place right now, and we really need to like have a lifestyle change. I don't know if that's putting regulations on fertilizers, regulating the chemicals that go in your washing machine, down your drains. Like, let's put time and money towards educating Shelter Island and the people that live here how to put better things in their water, how to put better things in their body, so that when they are going to the bathroom and the feces that are creating the majority of nitrogen, like, that's a whole, it's what you eat, it's what you drink, it's what you're around. And when you start to encourage people and educate them, a lot of people feel like they can be part of the change. And that just gives people a more incentive to support things like this and to support more people. Like, people want to feel part of the community. So education, every time the reporter comes out, just if you just see it every day or every week, like, that's how my brain works, you know? That's all.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Thanks, Gus.
Okay, before we go to Zoom, anybody else here? James?
James Eklund, Midway Road. Speaking just for myself, I agree with what was just said. There's a lot of other things that need to be done in conjunction with this whole issue. Initially, I came at this thing, I don't know, the central system, was it a John Cronin thing, or what was it? I was a fairly big proponent of IA systems. I said, well, why can't it be done with an IA system? At the time, my wife was on school board. I said, why don't they start doing something over there?
Everybody knows James chairs the WQI.
I'm not speaking as the chair, though.
No, but you're familiar with this.
Yeah. So anyway, I have come to learn that given the quality and the composition of the effluent coming out of these buildings, I guess it's high in ammonia and whatnot, but, IA systems are not completely suited, or best suited to deal with these issues. There's other systems that are better suited, such as the one that has been proposed. Perhaps there are other ones, I don't know. But I've come to the realization that, a central system is probably beneficial. I understand that people have issues, the ones who live next to them primarily. And I hope that their fears and property values can be protected and allayed at the same time. But Shelter Island, very similar to I'm involved with the Fresh Pond remediation as well. Fresh Pond is a savable thing, because it's sort of contained. And I believe the same for Shelter Island itself. I think Shelter Island is something that we can, to get on the road to saving it. I mean, we're not widespread. We're sort of unto ourselves. Certainly there are outside influences that affect Shelter Island, but I think we have the ability to do things that will make Shelter Island a better place to live. And, for my grandkids and their children and going on, I think, this is a step in the right direction. And I think we need to get the nitrogen under control. We need to get all the other chemicals under control. I think it's in conjunction with IA systems. I certainly am a proponent still of IA systems, and I think they should be put in wherever they can be put in, and in conjunction with shallow drain fields, which will take out other contaminants, which the IA systems themselves don't. So I think it's a big sort of a shotgun approach that we need to take here, and a multifaceted thing. So thank you for your efforts.
Thank you. Okay, last chance on tap.
Once again, I wasn't going to say anything either. But Joe, I want to ask you two questions here. One, on this new system, how are you going to maintain that? Is there a process in that? Is it a sand-based sewer system here that you have, or what? What's your plan?
So the system has to be operated by a licensed operator, same.
I understand that.
Okay.
I was one time.
Oh, okay, yep.
What I'm asking is, how are you filtering this before you release it into Gardner's Bay?
You mean the treatment mechanism?
Yes.
It's a carbon-based treatment system.
That has to be changed. What is the maintenance program?
It's quite high, yeah. It's on a scale of a decade plus. It's not an annual or a monthly thing.
Then it has to be taken to a place to burn it off. Is that what it is?
Well, there's also sludge production, as you know, for being an operator. And so the sludge in this particular instance is captured on site. This is an effluent-only treatment system. So each site has a septic tank as they would in a normal system to capture solids. Effluent is being treated only, which also prolongs the life of the treatment media. The sludge generation is also handled by the operator. So I'm not sure if that answered your question directly, but that's the concept of the
Well, there's more of a process, and I don't want to bore anybody about it. I know, Peter.
No, I was just going to say, I think you would pump out the septic tank at each site like you would a traditional septic tank. And then the treatment system is treating the liquid waste that's going down, and then that has a different maintenance protocol.
Yeah, but you're saying it's using carbon to filter that water. Okay, and usually you have the maintenance, and I want you to figure, I know you figured it, I hope, but you want the taxpayer to know that there's a maintenance situation and how much that's going to be and what the years are or months or whatever it is. No, I think you need to be really transparent on that whole thing, because it's more expensive than most people think.
Yep, and the operating budget, which includes the cost for manpower and for maintenance, is developed and included in the original engineering report. So it gives you a sense of scale as to what those costs are for the whole system. We've also looked at comparatively what the operational costs are of individual systems as they are now. The school system, even as an independent IA system, still requires a commercial standard. So there are operating costs now to be felt by these facilities, even if they pursue the individual IA approach. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
in any case, all those numbers
experience, and I know the newer things are different, but the second question. Well, I've been up here how many years? I've been since the 60s. Been coming and crying about Manana Creek being dredged. Okay? I know some of you have heard it. I know my neighbors have certainly heard it. There's one way of helping, and I always thought the island should own its own dredge and take care of ourselves. Forget about Suffolk County. But I'm an independent type of person. But flushing that creek will help relieve some of this. The only other thing, that Gardner's Creek's always had that problem too. You're gonna, if you're aiming at two different areas, you're gonna have to add, this is another expense, it's gonna have to add. You're gonna have to do it. So I want you to, I'm telling you to look at the overall picture. And I don't think everybody's looking at that. The end of it, you need to flush those creeks, and that means dredging.
It was approved for dredging.
Yeah, Manana Creek was.
Manana's gonna get dredged.
Yeah.
Yeah, but only to a certain point. Sure, because I'm all for, they only dredge where businesses are. That's how they started doing it. We didn't do that in the past, okay? I'm not in an argument here. They're only gonna do Island Boatyard, and that's where it is.
Does it go all the way down at the town landing?
It goes past the boatyard.
It's supposed to go all
It
the way
goes
down to the
down to
town
that same
landing
place where they
that.
stopped before. I understand it, and also it depends on how deep you go, because you're gonna have slush come into the middle. If you don't do it deep enough, you don't have a channel, and then you don't want anybody, I know it, okay? I'm not trying to argue in any of this, but it should go further, because it's on my end. So I'm saying you need to flush it, all right? And that's gonna be the same thing with Gardner's Creek. And they only dredged that once that I can remember, and it was to the bridge, and that's because the dredge couldn't get underneath it. I mean, a lot of, that whole area was filled from the dredge, and I know it because I bulldozed it. So there's a lot of, anyhow, I'm sorry, but I just wanted you, you're gonna have to look at the overall picture, okay? And I mean, there's more than what you're trying to promote, all right?
Thanks.
We do have a hard number on maintenance.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Tom?
Quick question. You just opened up a can of worms. If you're pumping out these.
For you.
If you're pumping these septic systems out anyway, why do we need that? Why don't we just put in holding tanks on these 7 buildings, pump them out regularly, and take that stuff to a treatment facility off island? Period. We don't need 2 million, 3 million, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And do that instead. Just get it off the island, and that cleans up this whole spot, lickety split.
Yeah, the county doesn't allow that typically.
Yeah, that's not a viable option. That's called virtual sewer districts. We couldn't even get a permitted holding tank for the Crescent Beach bathroom, which we had recently put in. That's part of the reason why it's a temporary trailer now. So there's the first regulatory challenge of containing all your waste and having an official system that gets pumped out, relies on it. And second is that it's an incredible amount of volume. You'd be talking about several trucks per day leaving the island. That's incredibly expensive. And I'm not actually sure that you can.
Who would want it?
Yeah, it's a volume that you'd have to allow. Yeah, it would be.
I would argue that.
Okay.
You don't fill truckloads of sewage a day from this building.
Tom, the county doesn't let us do that. They made it very clear with Crescent Beach that you can't ship your effluent off the island on a regular basis. So we were told we can't do it.
You gotta find someone else, get the answer you want.
Well, good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck. Anybody else in the audience before we go to the Zoom? Okay, Michael Shotkin.
I'm sorry, I just had to unmute. I think there's 2 overriding issues that have not been addressed. We had a very, very limited conceptual design phase, or if you want to call it a study phase, where that phase, all it did was establish the superior qualities of this nitric system and dismissed IA systems. And that's not the way to consider alternatives. I mean, what we're doing right now is we've gotten into a defensive posture about the preferred system, and we really haven't drilled down about how this money could more effectively be expended for the benefit of the community. If I just, I don't have notes in front of me because I'm driving, but we are spending $1.8 million on piping. Keep that number in mind and think about deploying that number in a different way. Think about deploying that number more effectively. And we're talking about 8 buildings in the center. There are over 60 buildings in the center that have antiquated septic systems. That could be addressed by this board and should have been addressed by making, without any cost to the taxpayers, by making it mandatory, as many states and many communities do, requiring that when a house sells, the septic system has to be upgraded. And we're talking about a comparison not between IA and a small incremental difference to the nitric system. We're talking about systems that are throughout this area that aren't even a part of this conversation, that are just leaching sewer effluent directly into the ground. And we're trying to, we're trying to say that that's going to cure all of our problems. If we really wanted to get out from under 2 things, one is pollution, we would increase the amount of IA systems that are being addressed. And the same way it was presented for the Manwaring site. Oh yes, if we put in 1 or 2 more IA systems, we're neutral. We could do, for $1.8 million, we could do multiple IA systems in the center and come out far ahead from Atlantic Creek. The last thing I'm going to say is about water quality. There's 30 years legacy of these pollutants in the ground still flowing. If we deployed some of this money, the $1.8 million, toward water systems, we should be piping water and not effluent. And if we deployed some of that money toward filtration, somebody asked earlier, how do I get rid of nitrate in my own home? Well, I'm going to answer that question because I do it multiple times for clients with a local vendor, and it costs about $2,000 a household less than $2,000 a household to remove nitrate from a home's drinking water without putting in community wells, which have somehow vanished from our considerations, and without utilizing Suffolk County as a water source. So in summary, please do not let perfection with the nitric system be the enemy of good. Think about this holistically in terms of drinking water, providing drinking water, and addressing all the other buildings in the center. 8 buildings yes, they're the biggest buildings, but
That's Michael, that's fine, thank you. Thank you, Michael. Just, we can come back to you after we go around again.
Let me just add,
Yeah, go ahead.
to the point about, equivalent costs, if we spent this money, in a different fashion for residential systems, just as a sense of scale, the equivalent number of units of this system, depending on how you are looking at flows, max flow, average flow, we're falling between 50 and 100 equivalent IA systems. That's when you consider total flow, 8,000 gallons, wastewater strength, double or triple what household wastewater strength is. When you break that all down from a cost perspective, you multiply out the average cost of a residential system, you come to the $2.5, $3 million value. So the cost in terms of nitrogen reduction, it's pretty close. The difference between those 2 approaches is that you've now relied upon all of those residential systems in the area to achieve the same thing you can achieve now. There's no reason why you can only do one. With this municipal system, we can achieve the equivalent of 50 to 100 units, and you can still put in 50 to 100 more residential IA systems in the surrounding area to further enhance these benefits.
So Michael makes a good point. The dollar approach is important, but when you break it down and how much would you get? Yeah, you could get 50 to 100 for the same amount of money, but you can do both. And you have a structure in place right now that homeowners already receive a significant discount in doing so. So we should let that process is great. It's one that even our surrounding towns don't offer. So
WQI is on that.
So there's a mechanism to do that already. We don't have to throw away one approach, for the sake of salvaging another. You can do both.
Thank you. Hey, I thought I saw another hand in the Zoom audience.
No, it's gone
It's
now.
gone. Okay. Anybody else in the Zoom audience?
Michael wants.
Okay, if not, Bob?
Pam.
Oh, wait, sorry, Bob. Pam Demarest?
Yeah, folks, I just had one quick question because when this discussion all started on the systems, one thing I haven't heard is what's the story with the library and them expanding their footprint? Because that was something that I know Lombardo was supposed to consider and the library was going to discuss with you folks as far as adding to what he was proposing. And has that been addressed or?
Yes, the library is in the early phases of expansion plans. And we've been in communication with them to understand the scale of what they're proposing. We have looked at what that maximum could be, and it's included in the current secret analysis and environmental review, which is coming next week's presentation. So yes.
Great. Okay, thank you, Joe, very much.
And that's the reason for the change in numbers between the original engineering report and what's going to be, discussed and analyzed next week.
Kim Nolan now.
Okay, Kim Nolan?
You're muted, Kim.
Sorry. Okay, so I just have one quick question on the wastewater treatment plant, which is, what is the maximum capacity versus the flow that's coming from the buildings? Because, you said it's not much more. In other words, it's not sized to handle a whole lot more than the town-owned buildings. So I just wanted to know what those two numbers are.
The current system maximum flow is 8,000 gallons per day. And the maximum capacity of the parcel is, it's not quite a fixed number, but it's someplace on a scale of, 10 to 18,000 gallons per day. So there's a number of variables that could influence that.
But 2.5 times at the outset, at the 18,000 level, that's about 2.5 times.
Yeah, and I see why you're saying that. It's a little tricky for simple discussion purposes because we're talking about maximum numbers. There are requirements that you have to design to that's what drives the 8,000 gallons per day. So we talk about numbers like design flow, average flow. They're typically about half. Then there's ways that you average what has gone through it. Bottom line is it gets kind of complicated to put a pin on it. The system itself has to have space for double the capacity in case there's a system failure. So you have a reserve area. So it's hard to pinpoint and say, oh, you have twice the space. You have to have twice the space for 8,000 gallons already. So presumably there's extra space there already. Is that space that you can't? It's kind of a hard number to assess. I think the important.
Basically, there's no regulations on something.
Oh,
like
quite the opposite. No, there's so many regulations, and that's the challenging part. But I think to answer your question, it's important to discuss it in terms of scale. So we're talking about a few thousand gallons in either direction. This by scale is a very, very small system. The Riverhead plant by comparison is hundreds of thousands of gallons per day. The Heights wastewater treatment plant is tens of thousands of gallons per day. And
How many is the Heights treatment plant? Do you know?
The maximum permitted is about 50,000 gallons per day.
Okay, and that's like for, how many residences, because, just going back a little bit, and I really am, don't want to be in the weeds on this because I have something else to say. But when you guys calculated the flows originally of places like the youth center, these were big flows when it's not used that much. So I know regulations have caused you to already start out with big flows. And so I thought it was 6,000, but you just told me right now 8,000. And now I see that we're really expanding to potentially 18,000. And so again, I'm
No,
gonna
I
move
think
on.
that's a mischaracterization. You asked what the maximum potential of the site was.
18,000, Joe.
Yeah, but you just said that would be used. That's not what I said. I'm not saying 18 is going to be used. I'm saying
Well,
that's.
I know, I just
Yeah.
asked for what the capacity was because it could ultimately be used. Anyway, I'm moving on, okay? I just want to go back to the moratorium. If
No,
that's okay.
we're gonna save that till the end of the meeting, because this is specific to this topic right now. That'll be in public questions at the end.
Bob
Yeah,
Cohen
you'll have a
has more to
chance.
say.
Yeah, you'll have a chance.
Yeah, and I just wanted.
I'm so comforted by that.
Thank you. I just want to make a comment that this town board can't decide to hook up more than our municipal buildings to a wastewater treatment plant. Has to go to permissive referendum, and the people of Shelter Island will decide if and when they want to expand the system, not this or any other town board.
Thank you. First, I want to apologize for blowing up earlier. It's probably a result of my passion about two things, but mainly the process. Part of it is I see people who have been given more than 3 minutes who are in favor. This is not just at this meeting, but people who disagree with the supervisor get 3 minutes and that's it. I don't even think I got 3 minutes last time, but that's it. The other part of the process is that we find fear is a very powerful persuader. And if you're going to compare the status quo, what we have today, versus what you're proposing, you're creating a lot of fear. And I think that's not just people, and all due respect to the people on Menantic Creek and due respect to the board, people can be affected in their decision-making by fear. And you take a look at those red lines going to Menantic Creek, but you've got to remind people that if they had a local IA system in the town, it would reduce it significantly, the nitrogen going into that flow. I understood that the IA systems, modern ones, reduce nitrogen flow by about 97%. I haven't heard any, maybe that's not the case anymore. Maybe it's changed. I don't know. But you also said that you're going to be increasing the nitrogen flow to Gardner's Bay by 1.4%, and that's not going to have a health detriment. So what I tried to say earlier is that the marginal benefit of the additional 2% or so of nitrogen reduction by using the Meehan-Waring facility versus the local IA systems is not going to have any health benefit whatsoever. And we're going to spend, under your own admission, at least another $1 million on this other complicated system that requires maintenance and all that other stuff. So what I think is what's really happening here is that you're spending an extra $1 million or more, okay, to move what's left of the problem, a 2% reduction in nitrogen, which is not much of a problem according to you, from one group of residents to another group of residents without any resulting health benefits. And as Michael Shatkin, and I rarely agree with him, said earlier, you can take that $1 million and perhaps do things in addition to the people on the downflow to Menantic Creek or other things and use that money in better ways. As to the variances that need to be gotten from the County Health Commission, my understanding is as long as the County Health Department has never denied a variance when you're not doing anything worse than what you have now. So if someone is 71 feet away from septic tank versus the what do you call it, the well, okay, it's going to be accepted. You're going to get a variance, particularly this is a variance for the town, which is going to be highly persuasive, I would think, to the county. Now, maybe I'm wrong with that, but I think a parade of horribles has been set up that has been biased against the alternative IA system. Finally, I was encouraged by the supervisor who just said that you wouldn't be able to use this plan for anything other than town buildings. without a referendum of the town. And I do think that the code or revision or proposal or whatever you call it, resolution on this thing for the public hearing actually say that. So you can assure people it's not going to be used for any.
State law, we don't have to say it.
No, we'll say.
But I would think you would say it to assure people they can change state law.
Fine, we could
All
say
right,
it.
thank you.
Just want to make sure that the public understands.
Not a 2%
The
reduction.
1.4% increase to Gardeners Creek is from everything that we're doing in the center. Is bringing everything to Manwaring Road. Then that additional 1.3% is what's going into the creek. To alleviate that, if we put one IA system on any house along the creek, we'd be in the plus or the negative.
And the same can be said for the Manhasset Creek, that you can reduce it by 97% by the IA systems, local IA systems, and then give them the money to build IA systems at their houses to protect their own drinking water. So there's other ways of using that money that I think are a lot more efficient than.
And again, I'll go back to Joe's point that by using that money the way we're using, it's the equivalent of at least 50 to 100 systems. So if we do that with this project and then continue to do the IA systems, it's a double.
Oh, but no, you're comparing it against the status quo. You're not comparing it against the IA systems. So it's not 100, it's something substantially less than that. That's the problem with the process. Too much fear is being used by the current, cancer and all this stuff.
I think the fear being put out there is that we're going to increase density and we're going to drop property values.
And that was a legitimate.
I think, quite honestly, I think this discussion has nothing to do with the quality of water on Shelter.
It sounds like, though, I agree with you. If you can put that fear away by requiring a town referendum in order to use that plan for any kind of community housing or regular housing or whatever it is, or local businesses who might own land in that area, because people are concerned about the potential for corruption.
Start, Bob, that we can't.
I'm not part of the FOX group. I'm not part of that group. I've been looking at this independently. I'm not an expert in this area, but I'm taking the numbers that I'm giving at meetings like this, and I don't see the marginal benefit to health benefits at all of using that system over the individual IA system.
I just have one quick question for you. The numbers you tossed out in the first part of your presentation, do you have those in a shareable format? Because I'd like to take a look at them, because you're throwing out numbers that I just couldn't understand on the fly or making sense.
The only numbers I mentioned was 3.1 million, which I think is consistent with your number.
Yeah, rather than doing it verbally now, if you could just email that and share.
Well, I'll have to take a look at I did follow, if you take a look at my pre-written speech, it has notes all over it, changing it based upon what I heard today.
I'd like to take a look at that, because.
Okay, I will take his presentation, circle the numbers and send them to you.
Thank you, yeah.
John Kerr?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Could I just add?
Hold on, Benny. Hold on.
The town was denied a variance for a wastewater system at the Legion Hall several years ago. That was the stoppage to our efforts to combine and do an IA system at the Legion with the school under John Cronin's tenure here. So there is a precedence for variances being denied. It's not a given that they would be approved, and we have a situation like that already under our belt. So that's not to say that, and I don't think I've ever made the case that those variances are insurmountable, but there certainly has been a lot of discussion about it's a guarantee, and that's not necessarily the case. And we have had a situation of exactly that.
And also down at Crescent Beach, where we wanted to set up a holding tank for the pumper station down there.
That's true. Actually, we
we
could not achieve the regulatory constraints at Crescent Beach for either a holding tank or an IA system. So that's how we ended up with the temporary trail. Yeah. So there is a.
Could that be?
There is
on the beach?
What's that?
Could that have been because it was on the beach?
Well, it's for a number of reasons. The beach itself isn't a regulatory constraint, but the holding tank idea was rejected on multiple levels of government.
Tommy, we wanted it on the beach for that very specific reason. We wanted a holding tank that wasn't going to.
Yeah, that's actually an application that made a lot of sense, that even with the highest quality of treatment, you're so close to the water that a holding tank makes a lot of sense. It's relatively low flow, it's seasonal, not allowed.
Penny?
Yeah, thank you. I'm really glad you are revisiting this. I'm really glad to hear all the input and that we're comparing the systems. I have a couple of observations. One of them is just a question, wondering if the horse farm may be contributing to this nitrogen level that's feeding into Menantic. I mean, that farm's been there for many years and a lot of horses have been kept there. So it's just something I wondered about. And a second thought, and I understand the concern for anyone in Gardner's Creek area that will be impacted by this, because I was feeling very similarly a year ago here with the other alternative airport. And I was wondering, is there any land near or on the dump area that we could set this up, which would be maybe, having less pipe having to be carried down to the creek, which, by the way, Sylvester Manor is on the protected land. I know we have other protected preserve on the other side of Gardner's Creek, and I know that they mitigated. Chris Smith from Cornell built a buffer so that runoff wouldn't go into Gardner's to try to bring the level up and of water quality. And I think similar things need to be done in Menantic, but I'm just wondering, could we set this up further away from any residential areas and not impact move more water into an area that doesn't need any more pollution in it? Try to mitigate it where it is. Try to solve the problems for Menantic, near Menantic. Those are my questions. Oh, just throwing it out there.
Thank you, Penny. Michael Shotkin?
Yes, I have actually 2 points. One is going back to something I raised before, but I'll state it differently, and I'll say time to benefit, time to clean water between the nitric system. If I understand it correctly, it will be 30 years before the legacy pollutants are removed. I would like the comparison time to benefit between IA systems with money being expended on the clean water side, because we have two looming immediate issues. I am a big proponent of planning for the future, but we have people who are drinking unsafe water, and my thoughts on the second one will come back to me. But the point was raised about ensuring density. I am a density guy because with regard to the center, it's an area which is sort of ripe for some limited amount of smart growth, a few modest number of stores and housing. But what we have done, and I think I can't believe I'm having a dialogue back and forth with Bob, who I disagree with so violently on affordable housing. But what we have done is we have removed, and it hasn't been mentioned, one of the safeguards that is an off-island safeguard which controls density. And that safeguard is the county. Depending on whether we have a private well or a community well, the density with IA systems is very, very limited. It's 2 dwelling units per acre or 4 dwelling units per acre with community water. So I really think the town needs something back in terms of absolute assurances that once we build it, it won't be utilized. And I put this in the context of there is no plan for the center. There is no really applicable zoning for the circumstances that the center faces. So that's one, but I really also want to emphasize having Joe come back and tell us the time to benefit if we were to put in pipe in. I think we got this completely backwards, in my opinion. We should be piping clean water and leaving effluent where it is. We shouldn't be making regions of the island winner and losers as a result of moving effluent from one area to the other. Please give me an answer about this issue of legacy and how long it's going to take to get clean water to tap.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I think Jim wants to speak, but before he does, I just want to remind everybody, next week, PW Grosser will be here to go over the secret report. And when that's given, we will respond to the questions we had from Sylvester Manor and from the Friends of Cockles Harbor. We have all those highlighted and they'll be answered directly. Okay, Jim?
Yes. First of all, Joe, thank you very, very much. I found this presentation to be a lot simpler to follow than last week's, and I think you broke it down very, very well. Secondly, I'd like to thank all the comments that were made today. Most of them are very, very helpful, and the more times we do this, there are some excellent points that are being brought up. I do think that Peter Grand's idea of talking about a protection zone in the center of town is something I'd really like to think about. I also think that Allison McIntosh, a point about education. I think everybody is on the town board agrees that regardless of what system we go with, whether we go with the municipal wastewater treatment plant or we go with IA systems, either one of those things is not the solution in itself. It's going to take a lot more effort on the part of the town to get the drinking water to a standard that is safe for everybody. I don't put a dollar value on that. I simply think that most of our year-round residents live somewhere towards the center of town. Their health and their safety is of utmost importance to me. I live down in Silver Beach, but it's one island. These people that service this town, that are our first responders, that work on our highway departments, public work departments, and everything else, are key elements of our community. And we need to keep that in mind. We need to do everything we possibly can to reverse the cycle of what's taken decades to build up. And I just like the idea of really putting our heads together and come up with a multifaceted approach to be able to do that. I think education has a role. I think the three committees that we have working together, CAC, the Conservation Advisory Committee, Green Options, the Water Advisory Committee, the WAC, all three of those organizations can help the town board, not only this town board, but future town boards, coming up with measures both for education and for legislation. You know, fertilizers and spraying of pesticides. All of these things are adding to the problem. And I think we need to attack it from a multiple point of view. Lastly, I would say this. For those people that are concerned about the upcoming elections, and the fact that perhaps 40 to 60% of the town board will be new next year. I think this community demands that anybody coming back to office or coming new into these new elected positions puts this priority as number one for our town. I think it's going to be a huge campaign issue. I'm excited about how candidates are going to respond to these questions, but this problem is not going away by itself. It's going to take a lot of effort to reverse the process. Number two, funding. There is no time like the present, both at the federal, state, county, and local levels, to be able to get funding, to be able to get things done. So there's no time like the present to start working on these issues. And finally, lastly, I ask, and I hesitate to go here, but some of the people that have comments that we talked about scare tactics here today a little bit. This town board is not looking to scare anybody. This town board is looking to solve a huge problem.
Too late.
I'm sorry, you don't need to put your 2 cents in. Thank you. I just feel that, is everybody that's campaigning against this municipal wastewater. And I understand the people that live closest to Manwaring Road having concerns, and I appreciate their concerns. And I think we have to do everything in our power to minimize any of these concerns. But I really have a problem accepting the fact that people really that are launching these campaigns, spending lots of money, threatening litigation, really have the health and safety of the people that live in the center of this island at hand. I think it is about density. I think it is about housing issues, and it has little to do with what we're trying to do to protect the health of people that we care about. Thank you.
You do. Okay, like I said, next week, our consultants will be here. We'll have the final secret report. We'll address some concerns. We're going to move on now. Give everybody a chance to leave if they want.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is we have IT department update. Basically, this started as an exercise on looking to how we can best let the public know about meetings that we're having and what's on the agenda. And I mean, I thought it was kind of simple to just go on the town website and look, but apparently people want to be told exactly. So in looking into that, it's a lot more involved than we thought. So Christina, you want to come up and tell us what's going on with the IT?
Yes, so we get a task from the board to explore the notification system for our residents. So me and Kevin and Coco got some demos from some companies and quickly discovered that it's way more complicated than just a simple notification app, I want to say. Typically, it's built into the website. So at this stage, we are compiling quotes from multiple companies. Currently, we are functioning on a website that is a small business kind of platform. It's very easy to update. It's basically designed for a small business owner to do the updates without the middleman, without the need of a big IT company. After these demos, we discovered that these companies design websites purely for municipalities and government entities, villages, towns, counties, states. And it comes with a lot of options, a lot of added frills. And we're looking further into it, like what we can possibly accomplish with it, where we can go. Currently, our website costs us $250 per year. That's the biggest upside of the entire website. But it also comes with a lot of downside. There's a huge risk of an easier error. There's a big risk of deletion of the entire pages. It literally stands and falls on 3 people, 3 employees of the town hall. Main downfall us as a government is that it's not fully ADA compliant. So we are looking into designing a new website. The upside will be mainly the ADA compliant that is guaranteed across all these providers. They focus, as I mentioned, purely on municipal entities. So that is something that comes with it. Big upside is permission division into individual departments. For example, we can give a logins to the town clerk. Amber can go at her own convenience, update her minutes, update her agendas. Now she relies on the media department to do this for her. So every department could have its own permission to update their own pages, and the risk of error is therefore minimized. If something goes wrong there, you know where to look for. Okay? These government websites come with a lot of added frills, a lot of different options, agenda centers. Down the road, we can explore payment options, automated forms. So bottom line, we can get a way better functionality of it. And I
love frills.
Yes. And the primary goal, of course, the notification. And that's basically a standard these days with all the government websites. You can sign up for notification for the emails or text messages. And basically whoever we spoke with offers this solution. The price tag for development of this website is somewhere between $2,000 to $20,000. That's the initial cost.
2,000 to 20,000. That's like,
Yeah.
we'll be at your house between Monday and Friday to set up your cable.
The difference is, and then, so that's just the starting point, but then there's annual costs associated with it. And then again comes somewhere between $1,200 to $7,000, right? So we have a company that would start at $2,000, but then yearly cost is over $6,000. Then there's a company that initial cost is $5,000, but then yearly cost is $1,200. So it's very hard to compare apples to apples in this instance because every company comes with a different starting package and with different frills.
And the other question I think that you'll try to answer as you go, continue to explore this is the viability of the company you go with.
Yes.
How long has it been in business,
Exactly. So we're looking at all of those, who they cover, how big of the company it is, whether it's on a smaller scale, bigger scale. We're looking into what our surrounding municipalities use. We're looking into what these companies offer. There's always some templates, some examples of the municipalities they serve. So this is the stage we're at right now. I believe that the next step will be to break down all the costs, all the options, all the features. We're hoping to select the provider within 2 months. And again, it varies based on the provider. How long do they build the website? It's somewhere between 2 months and 6 months. So we're hoping that if we get into this, if we get board's approvals and everything will go smoothly by the end of the year.
My Bon Voyage present. I love it. No
Maybe
flowers for
January.
me.
Just like when Christina says frills, it's not really frills. We're talking features.
For us, it's frills.
Yeah, we're talking features and functionality.
Features and functionality.
We're not going to be signing up for frills. Being able to have agendas posted, easily, having the committee meeting cancellation not show up on just page one, but the person, got 3 people and it's like, oh, we have to post it here and we have to post it there.
Yeah.
Right now, the way our system works, the functionality is horrible.
Yeah.
And we've had people
Very basic.
complain, saying, I showed up for a meeting because when I went to the committee webpage, it was on. I didn't go to the main calendar page, which said it was canceled. So
Yeah.
we're not talking.
Oh,
Yeah, we're talking about more automated system, more sophisticated, it's.
Less user error.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But we made the $250 work and go, it really did a lot, right?
So is there any connectivity, I don't know if that's the right word, or does there need to be between sort of emergency notifications and
Yes.
this potential here?
Yes, so there's another thing that, some companies do build this special emergency notification. Currently, we're using Code Red. So that's managed from the police department. But yes, we will look into this, which provider does offer emergency notification. Some offer it as a part of the basic package. Some offer it as an add-on. So typically there's a lot of add-on options. So that might, that initial cost that we're looking at might go higher and higher based on what our final goal is.
I see a spreadsheet in the future.
Christina or Kevin, I think like 6 of the 10 Suffolk County towns will use one provider.
Yes.
Those levels sophisticated.
Yes, it is. We looked briefly at what Southampton Southhold does, and our rough estimate is that compared to our $250, they spend about $10,000 to $15,000 per year for yearly typical use.
Okay.
It comes with a price tag, so it will
Right.
depends on the decision of
Right.
the board, how far we want to go.
Is it tied into population of all the charges, or are they just flat?
I sense it does, because every time we ask for estimate, they ask for population. So it also, we always go with a lower population, just to get a lower cost.
Which,
Yeah, that's the thing, that we have to look at justifying the price for 3,000 people per year round, right? So,
Or 5,000
or 5,000 if we.
on average with
Yeah.
the summer population,
that
who
comes
are
and
big
goes.
users.
Yes,
And
yes.
and we have data that we collect over the years, how many clicks we have, per month, per page. So that's how we actually create our home pages. Most traffic pages are on the home page. They have the specific buttons. So we have idea how much the website is being clicked on, and, where the traffic in general is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Chris, board member reports?
So we had a comp plan meeting last night where our CPAC was introduced to the consultants. And so we discussed, plans moving forward. We do have all of the chapters available on the town website for public comment. Please go in, read the chapters. At the bottom of every chapter, there's a link where you can put your comments in the comment section, and they automatically get sent to us. And when they get sent to us, they automatically go into a spreadsheet. That whole spreadsheet at the end of every week gets sent to the consultants. So please go online, read the comp plan chapters, make your suggestions. What is online is a very, very rough draft. So this is kind of to get our like basic needs to the consultant so they have something to work with. And then the consultants are going to take all these chapters, put them into a professional document, and give them back to the public to review once again. So this is like initial questions, comments, concerns, things that you think the town should be focusing on in the comp plan. So please go in, read the chapters, make your comments. If you're having trouble making comments, you can always email them to BJ or I, and we will include them in the document to the consultants. So we are going to have 4 meetings in the next 2 months with the CPAC, just work sessions to go over the last 4 chapters so that we can give those to the consultants with our initial notes and comments. And then the consultants are going to really take it from there with a rough draft of the entire document. So those meetings are going to be on the town website, so you can feel free to come and observe and comment. And then, yeah, that's.
And then the big push over the summer was discussed too, as well. That, that's when, not public meetings, big town hall style meetings over in the auditorium, smaller meetings with sections of the public. So we're going to show up at senior luncheon, because we were thinking maybe not everybody's computer savvy where they can join in there. Committee work, so the WMAC may get a visit from the consultants. The Shelter Island Association, we could request a meeting. One of the things that was mentioned is that Meg and I are going to develop a list of organizations and committees that may, in one instance, may be useful to the consultants, and in the others, the organizations might find a meeting with the consultants useful to them. So that's sort of the program for the next few months, and then over the summer to really just ramp up once we have a complete rough draft document.
Right.
Again, anytime you can comment. We're not saying that. We're just saying, I think the public deserves a good copy from the consultants to have something to really bite into.
Well, our goal is to have, these chapters reviewed by the end of May, so that the consultants can have a good, solid draft of the entire document by the end of June, so that July, August, September, when we have the majority of our population here, we can have all the big public forums, so everybody can be involved and understand what's happening and what's being presented, so that, we hit the largest group of our population. And then hopefully by, September and October, that draft will have been revised once again and we'll have a more final document. Because then it goes to the county, I think, Planning Commission, it goes through a secret review process. So there's a few things that have to happen, but we really want to make sure that we have a decent document for the public to review when the public's here and present in person.
Yeah,
So that's our real goal.
Important to look at the chapters, no question, but you need you need the whole thing to really have a sense of what the vision is.
And there's many options for review and comment. So definitely get your initial comments in now, and then the consultants are gonna really revise it and put a solid draft out, and then we're gonna do the whole process again with public meetings and feedback and talking to the different committees and the boards and just different areas of the public, different community organizations. I think it's gonna be a fun summer.
Yeah, you see a lot of those.
Of meetings and planning. Yeah.
Busy.
Meg, the two comments that I have in terms of comprehensive plan are the following. Number one, the meat and potatoes of the comprehensive plan come from the people. I think that's a concept that has been lost here. When you hire somebody from the outside, people question you all the time saying, well, what's their role? Why are they coming up with a comprehensive? They're not coming up with a comprehensive plan. They are simply taking the information that has been gathered and will be gathered and put it in a workable document. The second comment that I have on the comprehensive plan is when you spend this money and develop this plan and it is approved, how is it best going to be utilized by future town boards? So I think that's something that those two things are very, very, very important to me. That A, this is a comprehensive plan that reflects the wishes of the people on how they want to see their island develop over the next decade and beyond. And number two is, how will future town boards best utilize the comprehensive plan to make it a useful document, not something that sits on a shelf? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Jim, and it's a concern that BJ and I and the CPAC have had. We want to make sure it's a living document that really does guide the town in its moving forward. And the consultants have some very good ideas on how to make it a living document that, you need to reference and, look to when you're doing new legislation. And so there's some checklists and guidelines that we're looking into, and also some mandatory reviews. So annually you go through the plan and you say, okay, what have we accomplished? What haven't we accomplished? And you kind of make sure that what you're doing is on track with what the town has asked you to do. So
that is probably, Meg, that what you just said right there, that annual review, that is perfect. I love that whole idea that it's an ongoing review. It's a dynamic document that's being worked on all the time. So that annual review is a key element in the comprehensive plan.
Amber?
One of the meetings from 2 weeks ago was the EMS Advisory Board met. And one piece of news is Marion Brownlee is going to be retiring from that committee. So that's kind of a sad, because after Joy Bausman and, the ambulance and Red Cross affiliation, she's been the grand dame of the EMS board since it's been incorporated into the town of Shelter Island. So we appreciate all of her work over the years. The other thing that I came back with is we had been talking about doing 24/7 with the paid EMT coming onto the island. And currently Stony Brook is funding for our 12-hour per day shift, 50% of that cost. They are not willing to fund 24/7, the other 50%. They just don't think that there's enough call volume to
warrant it,
to justify the expense to them, because it does cost I think $241,000 per 12-hour shift.
How does the
per
Corps
year.
feel about that? Our ambulance Corps feel about that evaluation? Did they say, or?
No, they didn't really say. I mean, we just, here it is, and we were hoping to ramp it up. They've been working very well together between the paid and the volunteers, so that, any concerns that we had that, there could be a little bit of friction has not happened. We've been, very good in the EMTs that we've had come to the island and working with the volunteer corps. One of the things that we are gonna look at, the EMT, Jack is gonna look at for us is whether we look at funding it for just the summer months when we have the higher call volumes. We had budgeted for our portion of 24/7 coverage. So we do have money in the budget. The question is, can we find somebody to ramp us up for the summer season and then let them loose? Because it is very hard. Everybody is competing for EMTs to, be, staffing around the island, Long Island in general. So that was like the one disconcerting takeaway from that meeting. Switching.
Amber, the question I would have is, currently, right now, we do 12 hours a day, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we're looking to go to 24/7.
Yes.
Number one question you're gonna get is, what is human life worth? Is it worth $120,000 a year of taxpayer money to save a human life? Because it can happen, obviously, it could happen at 3:00 in the morning, and that person is not here. So I think that's a point that we have to address.
I think
And the other
that,
thing is,
Jim, wait, before, we've never not answered, and we've never reached a point, I believe, on this island where we've even had a delayed response because of staff. So I just kind of want to make that we're not in any
well, I'm not
danger.
talking about a delayed response. I'm talking about the expertise that you would have there at the scene at 3:00 in the morning, or at 12:30 a.m. or at 4 a.m. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about not having a response. I'm talking.
It seems the EMTs are more qualified than the volunteers.
Also,
Not discounting that.
Got you.
The other thing I would ask, Amber, based on the year that we just did this, where has our heaviest call been? Is it in fact from the 12 hours that we have the person employed now? And what's the breakdown? Is it a 60-40, 50-50, 90-10? So I would love to have that kind of breakdown of how we've serviced people, during the 12 hours that we've had somebody on versus the 12 hours we haven't.
Yep, I thought I did actually have that written down because Jack does keep that stat, and I don't see where I had it in my notes, but 66% of the calls were happening during the paid volunteer staff period. And then another number that they came back with, and you had popped into the very end of the meeting. The response time is like, we're definitely beating the national average. I think it was somewhere around, like, the response time is 5 minutes from the time somebody calls in to somebody showing up on their doorstep, and that has improved over the years. Like, from year to year, we just keep getting better. And I think the national average might be, 10 minutes or more. So, hats off to our volunteers. Okay, so moving on to WQI, also that meeting I think was 2 weeks ago too. One thing that was discussed was, lots of things were discussed, but one was we had used to give out rebates of 15,000. And so then we did an analysis. We were concerned as, pre-pandemic that we're going to run out of money. So, we wanted to, what was it actually costing us? What was the average? The county and the state had upped their grants a little bit, so we scaled back from $15,000 to $6,000 as a town rebate. The committee wants to look at what, is that still a good number? Is the concern that people, things have slowed down a little bit. And so I think the people who really were gung-ho about it, signed up early, but now we need to reach to the next level of interested people. Is funding a concern for people? So do we need to increase it? And I've started to play with the numbers a little bit. I need to bifurcate over the years to see what the averages are, because I'm showing like $12,000 is more the average, the out of pocket for somebody. So is that what we need to take our grant to? But with increasing costs, it may be a higher number if we look at like the last year or 2 years. So we just,
a review is underway.
Yes, so we will be analyzing that.
And also, let me just say that servicing, like, in other words, people are daunted by the process. They're just, it's a daunting process. So you're going to tear up my life for for 6 months or whatever it takes. And I have to go through paperwork nightmare. So the WQI is just seriously considering, first, they're trying to streamline the process for people on Shelter Island. And then secondly, to maybe, just for lack of a better word, concierge, to try to give people a clerk or some way to get through the process in a way that really encourages them to do this. Because, the goal is real.
So Amber, the county has guidelines for mandated systems. And then for the people that choose to do it voluntarily, with us, 6,000, they're getting the state and the county still, right?
26.
So what do they cut out of pocket of 6,000, you think?
Yeah, so the average had been about 26,000, and now I'm showing about 32,000. So, you have some people who can put this, a few years ago, were able to put them in for like 22,000.
Yeah.
So they weren't expending all of the grant money available to them. And then you had outliers that cost 56,000.
Yeah.
Complicated big home, needed to, reroute things,
Wells.
landscaping
Yeah.
costs, things like that, that we don't cover anyways,
Right.
even if there's excess funds available. So the number I think is going up a little bit.
Okay.
The other thing, and speaking of the concierge service too, it's something that's being looked at. We currently have a committee clerk who is assigned to the comp plan. So if we can wrap that up at the end of the year, there will be available hours for one of our clerks to be able to help people more through the process. So that's something where we could, start to facilitate that for people. And then the last thing, I don't know if BJ, you want to speak more to, because you were working on that, the CPF acquisition plan that's being updated. We do have Appendix X, which we have to update our comp plan, not a comp plan, our CPF plan.
Acquisition plan.
Yeah, the acquisition plan. And because WQI falls under there, we need to incorporate a section, which since it hasn't been updated since we started doing WQI,
Right.
we need to add a section that's what are our proposed water quality improvement projects. So it's just what kinds of things would we be considering? And so we had, obviously, individual IA system grants, centralized or other nitrate reduction systems, fresh pond remediation or other, water remediation projects, surface and groundwater remediation projects, fertigation proposal, educational things, pump out boats, stormwater collection, and then just any other unanticipated projects that would fall under the enabling legislation. Can't think of now, but could come down the pipe.
Yeah.
So.
And it's just the idea that there's a little bit of a pot of money there, and we're not holding it for nothing.
Right.
The idea, there doesn't seem to be anything in the legislation that we have to attach value to the project, so we have to sort of, not that specific, but when you look at the list, which you hit the most of it, I can't pull it up right now, sleep deprivation, but when you look at the list, you realize the pot will go very quickly with, with renewed dedication, post-pandemic, post-inflation, post-shortages world.
Other options.
Yeah, there's a lot there that needs to be done on Shelter Island. So anyway, I feel pretty good about it, that we put it down so people know.
So as long as we're on WQI, I see Kate still here. Kate was here last week, we discussed it, and I told Kate that it looks like we have the votes to approve it, but we just didn't want to do a special meeting just for that, because, we don't have to do as many special meetings all the time. So there's a town board meeting next week, so it'll be approved.
And we also want all 5 of us here to vote.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was out, now Jim's out.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're avoiding him.
Come on up.
It's just, it's been going on so long. I did ask last week, and I was confirmed that it was going to be in the form of a special meeting, just like last time, and then it would be such a short vote. Jim already said he would recuse himself. So why we would need 5 people when his vote would not be.
I wasn't,
You lost connection last week.
Yeah, and I just, exactly. I was transiting that day.
Yeah.
Normally I don't travel on meeting days because I go to see my mom.
That's fine. No, I don't blame you for that. That was an unfortunate timing of things. So when I asked if this is going to be the week that I finally got my vote, and I said I was told yes, and then I went to check the agenda, and I emailed everybody yesterday morning why I was not on the agenda, and no one responded.
I'm sorry no one responded. That's.
It's starting to make me feel like there's something else going on. I noticed that even in the appendix for the CPF plan, what's listed as Cornell was skipped. So it's like, I might be reading into it a little too much, but it's really starting to mess with my head.
Just honestly, I think that vote of 311, which I talked about last week, and I would recuse myself, whether I'm here in LA or I'm back in Shelter Island, that I'm going to feel the same way. And I think the three people that you have in your corner that are definitely for this, unless the three ladies here want to say something different, I think you're as good to go. I mean, it's a formality of waiting till next week, but I think you're good to go.
Okay.
And my copy still has Cornell Cooperative Extension or any other recognized organization doing.
Yeah, I don't know why it's dropped
restoration.
off.
Yeah, no, it should be on there.
Yeah.
So by next week, you mean at the work session?
No, at the town board
town
meeting.
board meeting at 6 p.m.
April 4th.
April 4th. April 4th.
6 p.m. Thank you.
And again, apologies for not notifying or answering the email.
Yeah, I saw it and then
You have anything,
went into
Peter?
a meeting.
No.
Stephen, you have anything?
No, Mr. Supervisor.
Are we good? Go, anything else? Enough. Okay, any comments from the public? Bob?
Yeah, I mean, she doesn't have
Have
her,
mercy.
yeah, she doesn't have her.
I really feel bad about what just happened. I don't know what the issue was.
I do too.
3 hours she was sitting. It's terrible.
Long game.
Couple of comments. One is on the moratorium. It's a new issue. I don't know where I stand in terms of, ultimately, I think that town code, the idea of having some kind of a limitation is a good one. I would suggest, from what I heard earlier from the committee, the commission, that perhaps the town attorney should focus on like a preamble to what you propose to do on the moratorium that is really robust. Because this town is a little bit different from some of the other towns. We have these water issues. It was the main part of the meeting today, obviously. A lot of these houses are being built on near shore, which is a concern for the environment. You have these houses with 9 bathrooms and 9 bedrooms, et cetera. You also have, these houses tend to have pools, which have these big trucks coming onto the island, which take room on the ferries, which is other towns don't have ferries. So there might be things that you can do that's unique to us to show that why the situation is a little bit different. You also have the issue of the character of the neighborhoods, and maybe finally the aesthetics in terms of what we're trying to do in terms of preserve the character of the town. And all of these issues that I just mentioned are going to be the subject of the comprehensive plan. As you know, that is another important part, that this is an ongoing process. It's only going to be about a year away. And then all these good reasons to do that. The other thing is that those factors that I just mentioned have an impact on maybe what you're going to be doing after the moratorium, maybe changing the code. I remember at one point terms like building envelope. I've never heard that before. I heard it 3 years ago, but there does seem to be a difference between a 6,000 square foot house on a 7,000 square foot property, or a 6,000 square foot house on a much bigger property. Or if that property is in near shore, that's also different. So there's a lot of variations that you can take into account in terms of special permits that you might want to consider layering into this to show why this town is quite different. On the IT issue, I think building websites, I have an IT background to some degree, enough to be dangerous. And it is a very difficult thing to do because sometimes someone will quote you 20,000 and it costs so much because that's the time it takes them to be using an old system they shouldn't be using. If they use the more modern system, like Wix or something, they have all these pre-made apps that cost virtually nothing. and it's much faster to do. I can build a pretty sophisticated website myself for virtually nothing other than the cost of the domain and the $200 a year it costs to use the Wix site and a few of the apps. On the other hand, someone who doesn't know Wix is going to have to take time to learn it. So it's a very difficult decision, and you're going to have to perhaps get somebody who does build websites as a consultant to ask you whom to use as a consultant. And to Jim's comment on the CP, the comprehensive plan, I do think it should reflect the community and not reflect the consultants. I think that's what went wrong last year, where the consultants did all the first drafts, and it was kind of bizarre. What I was a little disappointed of so far, and I apologize for not giving comments yet to the community, to the comprehensive plan task force, is there's just so much there. I was hoping that they would just simply take the 94 plan, which is really well written, very simple, very straightforward, doesn't use all this modern jargon and stuff, and take that and redline it and bring it up to date, which would be a much more efficient system than writing in a whole new vision statement, because it did a pretty good job back then. And I will take a look at it myself and provide the task force comments, but it's like, what is it, 100 pages at this point?
I will tell you that our chapters, the ones that the committee's been working on, really do throw in everything, including the kitchen sink, because we're not professional comp plan writers. That's why we have the consultants on board to help narrow it down and to help clean it all up. But we wanted to make sure they had all the information possible so that when they looked at the chapters and revised them, they weren't missing anything big. So we wanted to make sure that everybody's input, everybody's comments got in. So they're big, they're meaty, there's a lot to them, there's a lot of information. And, you know, when the professionals get it, they'll weed it down. They will cut out all the fat, all the extra, and really just make it poignant. Show the
Fair enough. Are you sure they have a copy of the 1994?
They do.
Oh, they do.
They
Oh,
have-
they do. And the 08.
They have the 94, they have the 08, they have the Dotson and Finkler.
The water.
They have all the recommendations that we've gotten to date from the public. They have a whole bunch of the town studies and reports. Anything and everything that we've used or cited, we gave them.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim?
You're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Okay, so first on the comprehensive plan, I attended the meeting and I've been watching the chapters come onto the website, and the really critical chapters for a comprehensive plan all came on the website within the last 6 weeks. And most of the comprehensive plan advisory committee last night stated that they really hadn't had time to even look at them before they go into the consultants. And I just wanted to remind everybody of the charter of the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee, which is the Citizens Committee. And they were to guide the Comprehensive Plan Task Force. Whereas what's really happening here is the Comprehensive Plan Task Force, which is, and you know, I really appreciate sleep deprivation, BJ, because I know you're working really hard, but it's you two guys writing all the critical stuff. Without the Citizens Advisory Committee, most of them haven't had a chance to read it yet.
That's
you know,
a problem. I won't hold you to your time, Kim, because I have to say that's a problem. 6 weeks. 6 weeks, and they haven't read it yet. Or I mean, so clearly some members had, but I'm like, 6 weeks. So
I know,
that's
and
why,
I think
you know,
you're the
when there's a
greatest
vacuum, you fill it.
I think you are one of the absolute greatest proponents of speed. And I do understand your frustration because you are leaving, and I understand why you want to get it done. Okay. Secondly, because before, you know, like I had to wait a long time to talk, so please bear with me that I did have a couple comments. So now on the moratorium, I assume that also applies to projects where the person wants to, they've already got 3,000 square feet, but they want to expand it, at least double it. And so would there be a moratorium on that kind of expansion?
They had to go for a special permit because they were going to ultimately exceed 5,999, yes.
Okay, so then my point that I want to make is that all such expansions, particularly in the nearshore overlay, should go on moratorium, whether they be a homeowner or a commercial business or some other, building a bunch of space and bathrooms. And I just think you should extend the moratorium to those.
Thank you, Kim.
Anybody else?
I would just like to let the public know that our next 4 comprehensive plan meetings, 2 in April and 2 are May, are to go over those 4 chapters that were released at the beginning of the year. So they're the natural environment chapter and the governance chapter are going to be done in April. And then the housing chapter and the zoning chapter are going to be done in May. So please go online, read the chapters, submit your comments, and feel free to attend those sessions. They're going to be work sessions for the committee. They're not going to necessarily be public forums, but you'll be able to comment at the end. It's so that we can really review the chapters like we have all the previous chapters. We just haven't gotten to these yet.
That's April 17th.
Yeah, April 17th and the 24th.
The 24th was originally scheduled as a forum.
Right.
And that's now being turned into a work session.
Okay.
Since it's on everybody's calendar. It's
Not
back on format.
Pam?
Hi, since you're talking about the schedule for the comprehensive plan, obviously it's changed because the 17th of April was going to be a public forum and now it isn't. Can we get that cleared up on the calendar that was posted? Because it obviously needs to be changed. And then one other thing that I noticed on the original calendar was that one of the meetings that's happening later in the year, I don't know, month 6 or 7, it mentions that one of the public forums would also be held in conjunction with the Comprehensive Task Force public hearing. And I think that that's a mistake. I don't see how you can have a public workshop and the public hearing on the same day. I think there needs to be some kind of break between there. I don't honestly, Meg, I don't have it in front of me, but I saw it yesterday and I think it was like month 8. Or
Yes,
3
so
or something.
that's the old schedule. And we made these decisions last night, so Coco hasn't had a chance to update the town calendar yet. But there will be new dates for these things, and the task force public hearing will be a public session. So it will be like a public forum that will act as the public hearing for the task force. And then there'll be other public hearings held by the town board. So we don't have a date set for that yet. All the dates on the calendar after the May dates are going to be changed at some point. We're just not sure what they're going to be changed to. So April and May are set. After that, it's open because we're going to have larger public meetings. We're going to have more outreach. It's going to change. So that's just what we have at the moment.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I understand that. It just, when you use public hearing in conjunction with a public forum, to me, it means 2 different things, but that's fine. I'm sure you'll get it straightened out. I'll be looking forward to attending the meetings for certain. And I'd like to just agree with Kim Noland about the 6,000 square feet. It seems to me that if there's going to be a moratorium on buildings and construction of this size on properties, it should include commercial properties as well as people who are expanding an existing home.
It does include the expansion of an existing home.
It will?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
it's very
the only
interesting.
the only thing we should explore is whether to add commercial, but I don't know how much zoning or in the near shore. But no, that's a good point.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Pam. Kim?
You're on mute.
Kim, you're on mute if you're trying to talk. You're still on mute. Julie, did you have any questions?
All right, well,
Okay, Kim, last chance. You want to get off mute or you good? Okay, I'm going to make a motion. We go into executive session to discuss employment history of an employee.
Second.